Good evening, everyone. Hello. Here we go. My hand tracking does not seem to want to cooperate right now. Troubling. Oh my goodness. Oh no. I have got to get this fixed. The cord for my hand tracking has been absolutely finicky lately. Barely working, really. It'll be fine. Worst case, I don't use my hands to talk. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Welcome. Come on in. It's time for yet another. That's maybe a little loud. It's time for yet another evening in the gallery. Tonight, of course, we are discussing the work of the late Edward Hopper. There goes my hands. Edward Hopper is a late 18th, early 19th century, to mid-19th century, actually, realist artist. I will describe what that term means if required momentarily. So glad you all can't hear the sounds of my hand tracking, connecting and disconnecting repeatedly. I guess I don't have hands this evening. I'll just see if I can't get that fixed soon. Anyway. So, yeah, we have a nice night of information ready to share. You all, thank you all for being here. I appreciate it dearly. Despite brief technical difficulties, I do not think that they will be as great of a hindrance as maybe one may assume. And in fact, actually, I am going to make it such that it is so easy to see what I'm discussing by simply doing the following. I don't know how I hadn't thought of doing this before. Excuse my brief interruption. Now, whenever there's something I want you to look at, I can point it out to you this way. Alright. So, I suppose it's time that we just got into it. About it. So, as I've described, Edward Hopper, artist from the early 1900s. He is described with a certain feeling of forlorn, or certain feeling of loneliness, a certain feeling, not quite of dread per se, but to many, his works don't exactly inspire hope in people. So of course I would like to make that at least just known before we go in. I will not be showing anything particularly distressing. However, what you do with the art is entirely up to you. However you take it, that's entirely up to you. However, I can understand there's a reason why people typically say this sort of thing. Hello, Enchanted. Good to see you. So, of course, I would like to provide just a, not exactly a trigger warning per se, but something of a ground, like a basis set, that, people find his work very sad. And you may too, and I'm just gonna say that. You might as well. It's not a guarantee, but you might. So, just be prepared. I don't think necessarily that it will be anything that is super, super awful, per se, but it's just something to be aware of going in. So, I suppose, without further ado, what do you all say that we go ahead and get right into it? I am going to ask everyone that you kind of give yourself over to the art a little bit this evening. This art and this artist work best when you allow yourself to become the person in the painting. Or you allow yourself to be there. So I've attempted to provide a degree of immersion, if you will, help you all with that, but the last step is you. And to truly, really appreciate it, I just implore you, go ahead and let it wash over you like a wave. So grab a snack, grab a drink, and I suppose it's time that we begin. Edward Hopper was born in Nyack, New York, which is about a few minutes north of New York City. It is something of a yacht building town. They build boats there, which is that's kind of neat. But what this led to early on in Hopper's life was something of a fascination with nautical items, boats, etc. Boats, submarines, etc. Of course, these submarines were not exactly invented yet at this point in time, let's be clear. I'm aware of that. But around the time of the war, he did have something of an inclination. It does have a few sketches of those. I'm getting off topic already. So, of course, growing up around a lot of nautical iconography and paraphernalia, he naturally had an inclination towards that. Additionally, his mother was an artist, and both of them, both his mother and his father, as well as the other women of his house who kind of dominated his childhood home, they encouraged him to do art. They encouraged him to draw, to paint, etc. And they supplied him with plenty of materials to do so. Now, what this means is that by the age of 10, this drawing right here, he had made countless sketches of just countless things. Typically soldiers of various types. He had occasional political cartoons, which were kind of interesting to look at. I didn't find his prepubescent self to be particularly scathing in political commentary for the time, but to each their own, I suppose. This is all to say, he drew a great deal of things. And let's go ahead and look through some of them. This is a sketch, I believe that this is from 1893-ish. We continue to the next sketch here. This is a drawing of a screenplay. Let me really quickly make sure this is actually how this is supposed... Yep, okay, cool. I just had to make sure in my folder that this was how this was supposed to be presented. Hello, Mono. So, this is a image of a screenplay, or a stage play, that Hopper went to, and then subsequently drew out the theater and drew out the stage design. This is important. Not specifically this piece, but his inclination toward theater. He will be a lifelong theater and cinema enjoyer, and this will become very relevant later on. So just be aware of that. Moving forward, this image of a vase is actually It's technically called Study of a Bowl. It's from 1892. This to me, it's a vase. To others, it might be a bowl. I'm not sure, personally. But that's not important is what it is. What's important is that it is... is that it has a significant degree of attention given to the lighting at hand. Additionally, the music that we're playing here just got super fucking loud on my end. Don't mind me turning that down a smidge. Hello, Average Indian Enjoyer, good to see you. What's important about this is that he has a very particular sense in trying to figure out how lighting works on objects. That's what we see here immediately, is that he's trying to figure out a source of light. And this is another very important piece of information that he is exhibiting to a certain degree, even at the ripe age of, 10. So, moving forward. This is a sketch of a dog. Sketch of a dog from 1893. He is 11 at this moment. He's 11 years old. That's kind of crazy, isn't it? Right? That's very... I suppose, I'm sure it's not technically the most impressive thing that anyone has ever made, but, I don't know. I don't think most 11-year-olds today could draw this. Most. Doggy. Very short while baby. With pencils like this. Exactly. Yes. This is graphite on paper. This I'm actually going to zoom in on. This is called Sketches of Man in Top Hat and Coat, Women in Hats and Heads. So this is just an example of a study. He was very early on performing studies, and this is partially related to how his family would influence him. Particularly the artistic inclination within his family kind of set him up with a moderate art education, a very elementary art education from a very early age, which means that he kind of has a head start a little bit, right? Ultimately, he pursues art significantly, but what he actually wanted to do to a certain early on in life, he changed his mind. He wanted to do boat design. Really. He changed his mind later. You can see a kind of the inclination of that in pieces like this. This is a sketch of a ship presumably called the Britannia. This is from 1895, so he's about 12 here. And he's just painting. He's not painting. Pardon me. He's drawing the boats that he likes seeing in his hometown. And it's really interesting to kind of see him grow from here. We move forward. This is another study. Of course, whenever an artist puts a dog or a cat as the or a raccoon of sorts in the as the subject matter, I do have to include it. So just a nice little drawing of a cat. Also, some sketches of cats. Also from 1896. This is Study of a Woman with oh, hello, Hikari. Thank you for the raid. Mods, can please get a shout out for Hikari. Thank you very much. This is Study of a Woman with Binoculars in a Skipper's Coat. It's a bit of a long name, but of course, that's what it is. It's a study. I personally think that this is a very cool piece. It's something about the way that her hat sits on her head I appreciate. It's aesthetically pleasing to me. I like her. It's nice. Moving on, however, from here. No, actually, hold on. Before we continue, I do believe that there's a reason that it pops more, actually. It's because this, I think, is the only study that we've looked at thus far that is done in ink as opposed to graphite. Yes, this is ink on paper, so it will naturally probably pop a good bit more as its line weight is a bit thicker, of course. Not mutually exclusive, of course. You can make very thick lines with graphite, but yes, this is pen. Moving. This is a piece called Alone. Another young Hopper forming young Hopper drawings. Again, it's not exactly the world's most technically impressive thing, but it is demonstrating a start. This is from 1898. This is from when he was about 17. He was just about to graduate high school immediately before this. Yes, so that's what we have here. I may sound a little, how to put it, dejected to some of these pieces. And that's largely because this isn't close to what we will see later on. Really, the intention of showing you these pieces is that he is a lifelong artist. He is a lifelong artist, and he has a number of very specific lifelong behaviors that he exhibits the entire time that he is performing art, or he's making art. Partially, the consistent depiction of women. He paints women a lot. Also, the immediate influence of theater. He is kind of enamored with theater and otherwise performing art for a very long time, for pretty much his entire life. And that will influence his art in the future. Additionally, his attention to detail regarding the study of objects in here, and then also in the study of anatomy. So, how do I put this? I have seen less nudity on Rule 34 than I have seen digging through this man's semi-complete sketches. The amount of artistic nudity and the amount of nude studies that this man did is genuinely baffling. There are entire pages, not pages like paper pages, pages like website, just delving through tons and tons and tons of pieces that are all, of course, artistic nudity. But it's just, I just want to iterate to you that I sifted through quite a bit of that going through. But so, we are now wrapping up with his early life, and he's about to go on to college. So, of course, he did multiple disciplines as well during early life. He did watercolor and whatnot as well. But so moving into college, of course, he studied at the Parsons School of Design, which would later be known as the New York School of Art and Design. Of course, founded in part by William Merritt Chase, who is a prominent American Impressionist painter. You'll note, it's funny in some ways. We've done 3 of these galleries so far, and all of them have concerned Impressionism to a certain degree. Interesting how that happens. Anyway, so, he studies under William Merritt Chase in college, and of course, I have more studies for us to look at here as well. It leaves an impression. That it does, doesn't it? So, of course, I have more studies to look at. These ones are going to be significantly more sophisticated, if you will. This is a study of eggplant, fruit, and bowl. Already, compared to what we saw in the bowl, quote unquote, or vase that he sketched in his early life, this is a marked improvement and also maintaining the same degree of care toward light and light sources. This is going to be a continuing theme. We move forward again. These are a collection of sketches of hands holding bottles. It's what it says on the tin. I really don't know how to hype this up anymore to you. It's yet again demonstrating how Hopper will continuously, over and over again, sketch something, or he's a man who is very concerned with practice. He practices a lot, and I will iterate on more on that later. This is actually a pretty one of the major instances of his style beginning to form, in a study at least that I was able to immediately pick out from the work that I had on file. This is a study of two seated figures looking out window. This is from 1899, anywhere from 1899 to 1906. And to anyone who's familiar with Hopper and familiar with Hopper's work going forward, you will immediately notice a number of extremely prominent themes that are going to come back. Most notably, it is people looking out a window. This is a very consistent motif that Hopper will iterate upon over and over and over again. Tons of his art contains windows. What is notably different about this piece is that the windows appear differentiated compared to anything else, which he will change in the future. But in this sketch, in this study, it concerns a very early piece of shared subject matter to the rest of his work. And he's roughly 20 at this time. So it's very compelling to see how the man's quirks that he develops later don't really develop later, kind of always has them. He's always iterating on them. So moving on, this is three studies landscape with trees, rooftops, landscape with the name cuts off. This is yet another set of studies. This time it's, of course, discussing how... exploring, if you will, Hopper's inclination toward toward architecture or buildings, which he also will maintain as a motif in the future. So keep this in mind. We move on. This is three studies: woman at window, man with hat, and again, the name cuts off in my file here. Yet another study. A woman doing something, and he clearly is attempting to get a degree of... So he's either crossed this out for some reason, or or he's attempting to look at his work, or Professor is potentially looking at his work, and attempting to highlight specific instances of anatomy that are either not up to snuff, or up to snuff, or he's using these guidelines. There are a multitude of explanations for this. But, of course, yet again, there's a woman as the subject of the larger sketch at hand, and it's again a study. The vast majority of his work is studies. Overwhelmingly massive majority of his work. He's an incredibly practiced and incredibly, how to put it, documented artist in terms of how he studies. He's a lifelong student, if you will. So, of course, we move on once more. And let me know if you want to go back and see something if I go a little too fast. This, of course, is a study of a pianist. It's another study. I don't mean to rush through these, but I'm demonstrating to you how much this man studies things. This is a study of a clock, and I wanted to bring this one up particularly because he had a very particular care given to studying and ensuring that he had the form proper of every individual prop that he ever put into a piece. I will kind of spoil something a little bit going forward. But yeah, hold on. I'll go back to the piano because you brought it up. The piano is just kind of scribble, isn't it? He's a rather abstract-looking man, too. Wonder how much time he had to do this. That's the question for me. But, so... the way that Hopper tended to prepare for a piece, for a painting, was he would have countless pages just full of drawing and redrawing the different poses of the people in it. He would have pages upon pages of him just redrawing the props within it. He wanted to ensure that everything about that prop, when it were to actually go in, is just right. It's a little anal in that way. But the way that you could describe his work is similar to that of a props director for a stage production or for a movie or a film, in that he wanted to ensure that he had everything he needed for the time that it was needed, which is to say, the permanence of the main painting. He didn't do anything until he knew it was ready. He did not shoot until it was ready. And that's what we clearly see in this clock. This is the last... not the last study we have here, but it's the last purely black and white study we have, I think. At least for the moment. This is Study of Woman in Skirt and Stockings. It's, yet again, he's studying, he's playing with a light, the way that the light moves on her body. Again, it is perhaps a little basic, but it's executed very well. Of course, I mean, he's an art student. I'd hope it's done pretty well, right? This is from 1899 to 1906, of course. During his college period. Something about her. I just appreciate the way that she's posed, the way she looks. There's something very tactile about the way that she appears here, and I appreciate that. I like that quite a bit. So, closing out our brief stint with these black and white studies, we'll move onward to a piece called Satan in Red from 1900. Now, it's not necessarily that he was a big fan of any... he didn't really discuss religion quite a bit. But of course, what we do see here is, you know, an early instance of color, an early instance of oil paint. Oil paint would largely become his preferred medium in the coming years. And this piece is in some ways very similar, but in other ways very different to other pieces of his. Very similar in that the color palette would remain kind of muted. Not muted per se, but dark. He had world's biggest okay. He would have a very dark color palette for a very long time. He would have a number of stints outside of it, and a number of attempts to play in the lighter palette, if you will. It's like an actor portraying Satan. Yeah, I can agree to that. What I do want to point out, again, Hopper he considers himself an impressionist, which means that he is obsessed to an insane... Why is trigger fire there? Whoops. At the painting. No, don't touch the painting. But so, what I would... excuse me, I've lost my train of thought. What I want to point out is his attention to light continues here, and it's even to show that even when he changes mediums, he is very, very devoted to the capturing of light. As you can see, the flames kind of rise from beneath this figure, and he's lit from below, which gives him a kind of foreboding look about him, but also it's because he seems to just be floating, if you will, above this pit of flame. Very neat. Very neat. We will continue to yet another study. He's in college, of course. He's studying quite a bit. This is study of a figure sitting on steps. There's something so simplistic about this, but also so technical. It both feels like there's a multitude of detail, but not. And this is just a study, right? That's kind of wild, isn't it? The way he describes it is just a figure sitting on the steps. It's not even necessarily a person. Which is interesting, because he doesn't really paint or draw that much that's that fantastical from here forward. Big fan of the way the water is done here as well. Very simplistic, very minimalist, if you will. Or not very, but it's closer to minimalist compared to some other people around him. I also like the way that the brick is done. It's almost rudimentary. Which would, to some, say, like, oh, this is an unfinished piece. Which you think, okay, sure, it's a study, right? But there's something captivating about this. And again, the attention to light, the dark palette. Just maintain, you see a suspenseful moment in a game / show. We move on. This is a young woman in a studio. This is from 1901 or 1902. This one is perhaps one of the darkest ones we will see this evening, in terms of palette, of course. But this goes to highlight, no pun intended, the light at hand all the more. Because this woman is portrayed in 3 colors, really, which are all just shades of one another. So her depiction here is entirely dependent on the light source. And this is where we see a lot of Hopper's strength. To render fabric in a way that's consistent with the light, to render the environment around her in a way that's consistent with the light, but the dark around her kind of creates a certain sense of foreboding. She might just be in a studio, but why is she here? Why are all the lights off? Wouldn't it make sense for a studio to have the lights on, or some kind of lighting? Isn't that where you do art? Why is it so dark here? Why is she in all black? She seems like she's been going somewhere. Why is that? There are a lot of questions posed by this piece very, very quickly, and I appreciate that quite a bit. I'm just looking at it for a little while. It appears like this is a moment, a mere moment in time. This is the beginning of a scene. This is not the end. This is not the event, even, of the scene. This is just the start. And that is really compelling to me. We will continue. This is Still Life with... I am being covered. Still Life with Wine Bottle and Metal Bowl from 1903. Again, highlighting his attention to a dark color palette. Very dark color palette indeed. The shine of the bowl is quite nice, isn't it? Again, that attention to light, that incredible attention to light. And, I don't have a ton else to say about this, but I suppose what I want to iterate is that even in oil, his attention to props is very consistent. So we will move forward from this piece. 3, 2, 1. This is a self-portrait of Edward Hopper in his college years, looking like you just walked in on him in a very dark room. Maybe he's sketching something. Who knows? Maybe he's working on something. He looks like the slightest tad like John Mulaney. But it's almost interesting how his attention and dedication toward the dark color palette and black backgrounds even works with his self-portrait. What is he doing? What is he trying to say about himself? There is another self-portrait from him that I have right here. This is by far his more famous self-portrait. This is a self-portrait from 1903 or 1904. And this one, very, very much so, highlights his features a bit more. His hair is also significantly better here. But so, I suppose this is a reasonable way to think about... Pardon the sound. A much more reasonable way to think about him than the odd sort of candid look of his other self-portrait, which of course he went for at the time. It's no less valid, but people tend to like this one a bit more from looking at his college years. So moving forward, yet again, Edward Hopper is maintaining a degree of intrigue about architecture, as we can see here. He's rendering it in oil with a degree of not quite a degree of abstraction, I don't want to say, but he's using oil paint to part of oil paint's strength. There's a certain haze about this piece. Additionally, pardon me. I'm not entirely positive what he turned this in for, but what is with that little building in the background that looks like a TV remote? It feels almost uncharacteristically rudimentary for the man, doesn't it? That's odd to me. That's very odd to me. It's just chilling there. Yeah, it's just vibing. Now, I will show you the last of the work we're going to look at about his college days, and I'll tell you more about his college days momentarily. This is a study of hands. Once again, this study, however, is performed in oil paint. However, even in a study, yet again, regardless of whether or not he is studying something or actually performing something, he will hold strong to his dedication toward the black background and dark color palette. I do quite like the flexing of the fingers here as well. More like a city. He's a big fan of hands. We all love hands here, I'm sure. So, let me tell you about how he did in college briefly. So he studied under one William Merritt Chase, as I mentioned before, a prominent American Impressionist painter, who very much kind of put him onto Impressionist sentiments, as you will likely see within his work at this time and also in the future. Again, he loved light. That is one of the defining features of Impressionism, is light and how it plays with the rest of the scene, particularly among the French Impressionists, who he managed, or he tended to model his style around at this time, particularly Edouard Manet, not Monet, Manet, and Edgar Degas. He also, notably, he did not just learn from an Impressionist. He also learned from one Robert Henry, who was kind of a big deal, as is William Merritt Chase, of course. But Robert Henry was a bit of a big deal because he was a leading figure in a sub-genre of the realist movement in the early 20th century in America called the ash can movement. Now, so let me tell you really quickly what realism is. Realism is an art movement dedicated to painting things that exist, or things that could feasibly exist, and things that, through composition and through clever use of color, can be heightened, regardless of their existence or not, right? To create a point. That's what realism is. Now, the Ashcan School, specifically, was a Philadelphia-based endeavor, which was very dedicated toward depicting real life. Not just real things, but real life, if you will. And not just real life for poor people. There are a number of very notable pieces in the Ashcan School of Thought. Some of these include... it's not Fripp. That's not what it's called. Pardon me, it's George Bellows, but George Bellows' work generally falls into the Ashcan. Of course, Robert Henry counts as a Ashcan school, a school of Ashcan artist in this way. Pardon my brief lagging there. Now, so he learned a lot of Ashcan sentiment, and actually a lot of people do kind of mold him in with the Ashcan folks, despite the fact that he doesn't necessarily fit. His intentions are far different, and what he intends, and what he portrays is a little bit different as well. The Ashcan School was a Philadelphia-based school that was actually specifically dedicated to depicting real life for poor people in New York City, which is weird because they were from Philadelphia. You'd think they'd do Philadelphia, but they didn't. They did New York City. I don't know why. I can't tell you why, but they decided that New York was the right place to do instead of the city that they lived in. A little odd. Just a little odd, isn't it? Of course, moving forward. So, the kind of educational DNA that Hopper gets here, Edward Hopper gets here, is a mixture of impressionist and realist sentiment. He was taught by an impressionist, and he was taught by a realist. And this will pretty much result in his style. The significant attention to light, and also the significant attention to real things, and things being manipulated in such a way to tell a story, as opposed to a story being depicted inherently. So, do we have any questions about his college life or his early life that I can elaborate on before we continue? Let's enjoy the music for a moment. All right. So, if there are no further questions, I will move on to what I'm choosing to describe as his post. Did they travel around much? I missed a few. They, as in Edward Hopper? Not quite yet. He does momentarily, but he, Look, the Ashcan School probably did travel, because they went to New York to paint all their shit, but, no, not... Edward Hopper didn't exactly move or really go anywhere the first, 20 years of his life. I got you. No, he very much kind of stayed in the general New York sphere of influence. He went to theaters, but that's whoop-de-doo, you're in New York, you know? You can't walk 10 blocks without seeing a theater. It's not hard to get a theater. So, we will now go ahead and show his post-college years. So immediately out of college, despite, the talent that we are recognizing in him at the time, he wasn't exactly a rock star straight out of college. Which is unfortunate for him. Because he has to get a job doing illustrations. And he hated it. He hated it. He got a job doing illustrations for a collection of magazines, and would later do freelance work in the same field. But until he could get people to actually buy his paintings, this is how he made money. He did this 3 days a week, and he did this for like 20 years. He would do illustration work. He'd try to leave it behind multiple times, but he wouldn't be able to until something later. So yes, post-college, he immediately gets a job he doesn't like very much. But it pays the bills, and he does it 3 days a week only, and it manages to keep him afloat, so I guess how bad could it really be? Can't get a job like that these days, I'll tell you that much. So, of course, we move onward from this piece and to this piece. This is another piece of his that is illustration work made for the purpose of promotional material. He did this to make money because he didn't want to starve to death and he couldn't sell any paintings yet. Of course, this isn't exactly his artistic merit on display. I'm more or less just showing you this is what he did for 20 years, and I don't really need to show you a lot more of these. He did do some propaganda around World War II that got him actually some awards, but his illustration work was never his pride and joy. Under any means. Under any means, his illustration work was not his pride and joy. But, so, of course, his life isn't entirely miserable immediately after college. After all, he lived in the early 20th century, which means that he could just fuck around with a 3-day-a-week job and be perfectly fine. Which is why he was a big, big fan of French artists. And he was such a big fan, he went to Paris 3 different times to go ahead and try to learn more about the Impressionist painters that he really, really admired. Your children playing yourself the whole time. So I have 5 pieces here to show you all. This is Stairway at I can't read. I can't speak French. Stairway at 48 Rue de Lille in Paris. It's a stairway. Again, extremely dark palette. He's painting what's there. He's a realist, but he is also painting how the light hits every aspect of it. It's the same work that he's been doing. Just he's doing it in a way to learn more and try to perfect the styles of those who he wants to imitate. Or be a little bit more like. This is Bridge in Paris. I mean, if there were ever a safe bet on figuring out what's in this, it's in this one. Yet again, something of a similar point. Dark color palette. This sort of cropped composition. This is actually a watercolor piece that he did while I do believe while he was in Paris. This is Couples Near Poplars. And this is the beginning of another very major theme in his work. An unhappy couple. The poor guy. He would depict many a dejected set of folk. This woman, for example, is extremely so not interested in whatever's happening here. She is downright sour, I might add. He has something of an inclination towards sad women in his work. Which I don't really have an answer. Was he ever in an unhappy relationship, or just sad he could never get a date? Oh, you'll see. So this is Couples Near Poplars, and I bring this up because, well, despite it being a watercolor, because of the fact This is another one of the earliest examples, actually, of a really unhappy woman in his work. It was kind of just like, there's either a reason or not, but the unhappiness of this woman is not exactly depicted. What is she unhappy about? Why is this man seemingly indifferent? Why is this man so tall? Why is she mad? What's she mad at? Is it just because she's French? They kind of like that sometimes. It's a question that can't be answered, and it can only be answered by you, viewer. Why is she mad? I wonder. So, moving forward, I have 2 more pieces to show you in his post-college life. Her Hot Pockets burned. Damn. So yet again, more studies. This is a Parisian woman walking. She's both French and dating a Frenchman. Double L. So this is a Parisian woman walking. Yes. She's got a big hat, but this is another study, ultimately. Even out of college, he was performing a significant number of studies because he found it to be good for his work. If there were ever if there were ever a man to look at to prove the effectiveness of performing the same things and same tasks that you were taught in school, it is Edward Hopper. Edward Hopper is absolutely someone who thrives on the basis of continually redoing and studying repeatedly, which he will never stop doing. In fact, he only gets more meticulous about it, actually. So moving forward once more, this is an oil painting of the Notre Dame. Look at that. Good old Notre Dame. In the morning, too. How about that? One thing I particularly like about Hopper, and I'll bring this up again later, of course, but his work is very, very suited to a specific time of day, if you will. Some pieces of his are legitimately just named after hours of the day. But this piece in particular feels like morning to me. And again, the attention to light is actually significantly brighter for him, but it's still muted and kind of dark, and its subject matter is about as dark as day can be, in a lot of ways. At least to him. So he didn't really care for abstraction. I want to point out, around this time, around the early 20s actually, there's beginning to be a move toward abstraction, toward things like Mark Rothko's work, or Jackson Pollock's work, or Pablo Picasso's work, to name an international example. Dali. There is a lot of abstraction beginning to be made, but Hopper doesn't really care. Like, he just doesn't give a shit. He doesn't want to do it. He's not interested in it. It's not his bag. He likes what he likes, and he's going to paint what he likes, and he's going to do it really well. And that's what he does. And so, moving into his, what I have deemed the struggle years, he paints exactly that. He returns to America after 3 different trips to Paris. He does, unfortunately, get himself a shitty job one more time. Whoopsie daisy. He's still going to doing an illustration, and he starts to get into a bit of a slump, if you will, at least according to him. So this is Tugboat with Black Smokestack. It is exactly what it says on the tin. And again, the playing of light, the kind of stark geometric way that he paints buildings. This is an example of such a thing. Something to take bad jobs. Yep. Oh, thanks. Thank you. Oh, fuck. Wait, you know what this is? I had to... One moment, everyone. I had to censor a few of these. And I just realized that the piece here just... 'cause I censored it actually after I set up the OBS directory. I really... Hold on. I'm gonna check something really quickly so I don't accidentally show... Okay. Alright. Okay, we should be good. We should be good. The version I have in here is the censored one. This is the piece Summer Interior from 1909. This is a piece with a really, really strong impressionist sentiment about it. Just look at this. Like everything here is the idea of the prop. Right? Everything here is the idea of it. And it lets you kind of fill in the blanks. He's very much leaning into Impressionism in this. One of the more abstract things he ever really does, honestly. Moving on. And of course I had to censor this for Twitch. She just kind of like... This one was more tame. I'm not entirely positive I would have gotten flagged for it, but like... I just wanted to be sure. Because it looked like there might have been something there. This is a piece depicting the Queensboro Bridge. This is an interesting use of fog. Again, he's a realist, he is painting real things, and he has a certain appreciation for architecture. Yeah, no, it's quite nice, it's quite nice. You know, it's interesting, actually. He painted every bridge but the Brooklyn Bridge, which is the most famous bridge in New York. Isn't that funny? He paints all of them but the Brooklyn Bridge. This next one is quite silly. This is the piece. I think it's mostly just because he's a contrarian of sorts. This is the piece Soir Bleu. This, in some way, is metaphorical of how he felt about his languishing career and how he couldn't exactly get work, or his work was taken for granted or used kind of generally in something of a superficial manner, right? He was an illustrator, and he didn't really like that job. Additionally, here it's debatable, but you could argue that some of the people in this piece are meant to be notable Impressionist painters. One Van Gogh on the second to the left there. Something else is kind of silly about this piece, actually. So, of course, he is meant... The clown, more or less, is meant to... Yeah, it does look like Van Gogh, doesn't it? There is an argument to be made that's intentional. So... The thing here is, he feels like a fool, in some ways, for attempting to do the thing that he's doing. And he doesn't particularly care, and even in this piece, actually, he is pushing back against something. There is an odd uptick in the presence of quote-unquote French pimps in New York City in this time, and there was an attempt to crack down on them. So this leftmost gentleman is actually modeled after one such quote-unquote French pimp. And here's a study, actually, of that man made prior to the painting of Soir Bleu. I think this is pronounced un maquereau. Maquereau. I don't speak French. Yeah, right. He's a poser. I think that's an interesting sentiment. That he doesn't have a degree of fame, therefore is a poser. Possible. Of course, motherfucker looks French. I mean, yeah. French pimp is not so. Yeah, right. No, it's very odd, isn't it? Hopper is always something of a contrarian in this way. There are a couple other instances where he will paint something directly in response to something else. I don't think I actually included the piece, but there's a piece called The Bootleggers, which was painted at the height of the Prohibition movement, in which it just shows two guys smuggling whiskey across a river. And there's another piece that I will show you called Girly Show, which was made in a time when a decency league was attempting to ban the existence of burlesque performance. And that one will be censored because, well, I want you to guess what's in it. So, moving onward from here. So he returned from Europe, he began living in New York City again, right? He has to do illustration, but he wasn't exactly going to sit still, right? Because just being in New York wasn't helping him, clearly. So he went somewhere else. He went to Gloucester, Massachusetts, and he saw inspiration, and he made his first outdoor paintings in America there. These are the Gloucester paintings, of course. This is a painting of Gloucester Harbor. In this time, he very much focused on buildings. Not quite. Buildings and objects, not people. Which is interesting to me. Of course, not that he hadn't been doing that before, but he's very much honing in on this side of his work. We move one more piece over. This is the Italian Quarter in Gloucester. This is, yet again, honing in on the sort of landscape work. It's decidedly empty, save for two people in the back there, right? Additionally, I would like to point out with this piece, I really love the way that he uses brush strokes. He does better, quote-unquote, work with it later, more impressive work with it later, but, like, just the way that the wood is textured and the dirt is textured based entirely on how the brush slides across this piece, and how consistently as well the sky is made here. It just is very appealing to me. I like it quite a bit. And so, of course, he will also, at this time, paint his first lighthouse. This is Squam Light. This is yet another landscape piece made in Gloucester, Massachusetts when he was there. And, of course, it's of a lighthouse. He tends to paint these quite a bit, but I don't necessarily identify it as a major motif. It's just kind of something he tended to do every now and again. I like that greenhouse, too. But so, things aren't all bad for our boy Edward Hopper here. In 1913, Hopper finally managed to sell a painting. Note, he had been out of college for like 7 years by this point, and he had not managed to sell a single painting, when that was what he was expressly trying to do. He managed to sell a painting, and he managed to sell this piece titled Sailing. A nautical piece, of course. Nice water there. Very simple lighting. This is actually painted on top of a previous self-portrait that he made. This sold for $250 when he was 31 years old. So if you ever think that you're taking too long to get started, Edward Hopper didn't sell anything until he was 31, despite trying very hard. So he moved after this, after he was done traveling to Massachusetts and whatnot. He moved into Greenwich Village in New York City. And he would continue doing illustration work. Thank you for the hydrate. He would continue doing illustration work, but this time he would begin doing it a little bit more so. He wouldn't necessarily stop doing it for other people, but he would start doing it for theater and cinema. He would start doing posters and promotional stuff for them, which he still hated doing, but he liked doing it a smidge more because, well, he liked the cinema and he liked theater quite a bit. He would also regularly take influence from them. Of course, after 2 years of not selling anything, after selling a grand total of count 'em, one paintings, Hopper decided to do something a little bit different. He was at an impasse about his paintings. He felt that they weren't up to snuff lately. He felt that he couldn't really get it out, if you will. He would sit at his easel and he would just kind of sit there. He'd just look at it. And he wouldn't really move his hand at all. He'd just be kind of paralyzed in a slump. Which is an awful feeling. It's truly an awful feeling. Hopper decided to start doing something a little bit different. He took up etching, which, if you're familiar, looks like this. Hopper made these extremely evocative etchings, which to me really captured the core essence of Hopper's work, if you will. There's something just about the way that these look to me, which is really interesting. Hello, DaptRecon97. Hi. The intense darkness that is contrasted by the intense light in these pieces is really, really compelling to me. Really incredibly compelling to me. And I'll make this a little bit bigger. One of his first ones, I assume. This one was... Let me actually find the year for you really quickly. Just while I can... Let me pull that up. You're learning so much. I'm glad! Hello, Puff Possum. I'm very glad you're learning. That's very flattering. I appreciate that. So yes, this is in his struggle years. This was made between 1915 and 1918 or so. This is around the first few. Yes, this is around the first few. So the first 3 years of him trying it out, which for him, of course, is a long time, kind of a short amount of time, because he is so incredibly methodical about everything. So these are his etches. This is a piece called Street in Paris. He would actually start doing these in Paris. He actually didn't start these in America. He started doing them in Paris a little bit. He would come back to America and continue on it further, but in his attempt to capture form, figure, and landscape and architecture, this is where he kind of started, if you will. Was in Paris. Paris. I hate saying that. I say it all the time in these. Paris. So then we move forward to another piece of his. This is perhaps one of his more famous ones. This is the L Station. Look at that. He knows exactly where to put a line. Which, it's odd. It feels so random, doesn't it? But it's so evocative. The way that the shadow plays with the light here is really, really cool to me. And despite there being no discernible light source by color, there is a very clearly discernible light source by shading, which is, how you discern it, but I still think it's impressive. I still think it's cool. Art is cool. Art is cool because it makes you think about shit that you wouldn't have thought about before. In the depth and the closed windows. Yeah! Exactly! They do charcoal art hatches in art class. Right? Yeah, it was a similar thing. Similar thing to etching. I quite like this piece. However, the one that I will show you 2 from now is my personal favorite of his etchings, and also the final one I will show you. Because he does kind of only do this, as a stint, if you will. The next piece is Cow and Rocks. This is to establish to you that in his etching he wasn't mutually exclusively only doing it about urban centers. Oh my god. Thank you very much for the sub, Puff Possum. I appreciate it a lot. Cow and Rocks. There's a cow, and there's some rocks. Look at that. But so this is to demonstrate to you that he wasn't entirely... cow that rocks. This is from 1920. He wasn't entirely devoted in his etching to exclusively pardon me. Let me get a sip of water really quickly, so I can stop choking on my tongue. So, this is to demonstrate to you that in his etching, he wasn't exclusively dedicated to urban pieces, urban centers, in his etchings. He was actually never, despite what a lot of people will tell you about him, he was never fully dedicated to urban work. And I will describe this a little bit more later, and kind of tell you a little bit more about it later, but he's never really been just a city guy. He grew up in not quite a suburb per se, but he grew up not in New York City. He grew up around it, definitely, but not in it. What I also really love about this one, what I really, really love about this one, is that he uses the arcing of the lines here to really effectively portray the way that the wind is blowing here. It gives the impression of blowing grass. It gives the impression of movement, if you will. As well, his lighting is impeccable, as per usual. He practices this constantly. The cow's walking away. Where's the cow going? Going off into the distance. Maybe he senses some danger of kind. He's kind of just standing still. I wonder what's going on with this cow. Let me show you. Let me cut the tension. Let me show you my favorite piece of the etching collection. And that would be none other than 1922's Night Shadows. Look at this. Look at that. You want to talk strong lighting? This is film noir 21 years before film noir. This piece is, actually, to talk about cinema again, because I did just bring up film noir, this piece is very, very directly inspired in some ways by certain shots that our beloved Hopper here saw in German Expressionism when he was in Paris. He is a really, really big fan of the cinema, and he, of course, went and saw some films in France, and he would naturally see films like Metropolis or other such German Expressionist film, and he took this kind of shot, if you will, the shot from above, and he would put that into this piece, but with his own particular sense of taste regarding lighting and really, really strong, consistent dark color, right? This looks like a study of film noir. It's interesting, because film noir studied this to be film noir. Film noir, of course, is, in a lot of ways, you look at 1941's The Maltese Falcon, what is consistently considered the very first film noir film. This piece is that. It is very strong lights and very dark darks, which serve to frame our character. Where's this character going? What's in the alley? Why is it so dark here? There's a certain sense of desolation made by this piece. It is almost more violent. It is not more violent. It is almost violent in its in the way that it presents itself. It's so stark, so strong, so contrasting. How this is what inspired film. He had a very, very big effect on film noir and film in general, actually, which I will go over later. I keep saying that. I promise I'm gonna make good on all these. I'm gonna cover that later. We are in the earliest section, if you will. Not the earliest section. We're in a early section of his life currently. He's like 20 right now. He does most of his best work from the ages of 40 to 88. Or like 86, or whenever he dies. That's wild, isn't it? So, as much as I hate to move away from this piece, I suppose we do have to after a little while. We love this piece quite a bit. Big fan of this etching piece. And we move briefly, of course, beyond here. So I would like to point out, actually, before we continue, he does receive some minor honorary recognition about his etchings in the early 20s. He does actually get some recognition. He's starting to get the ball rolling about the clout that he has as an artist, which is really good, because at the time, in order to sell shit, you needed to have some clout. Despite the fact that he studied under kind of big-name people, he didn't quite have that yet, and that's what's most important about making a career as an artist at this time. Was you had to know the right people, right people had to know you, and they had to have an idea as to what your art was, and it had to be good. So, of course, pieces like this blew people away at the time. So, the etchings would also... Let me just go through my notes briefly. The etchings would demonstrate very clearly common motifs of Hopper's moving forward. Again, the dark darks, the light lights. And he would begin regaining some steam in his paintings, actually, after getting a degree of success with his etchings. And that is seen in the stuff that he practiced in his etchings. That is then put more consistently and more constantly into practice in his oil paintings. And this is very, very easily seen with New York Interior, and another one that I will show you immediately after this. This is a pretty famous piece of his. I wouldn't say his most famous necessarily, but it is a well-known piece of his. And what I would like to specifically highlight about this piece is something of a, and you're gonna think I'm weird for saying this, but just hear me out, okay? There is a voyeuristic look, or a voyeuristic quality to quite a bit of Hopper's work. It almost feels as though you're peering through a wall sometimes. So voyeuristic implies you are watching someone while they don't know that you are watching them. It's extremely candid. It's like... So the reason why I said hear me out on this one is because there's a kink called voyeurism, and that tends to be what some people think about it as these days, and that's not necessarily true. It's also other things, but some people look at it in the kinky way first. But so, let me... I'm just going to grab the definition really quickly. Voyeuristic. To be voyeuristic is to get excited or interested by watching others. While this word often has a sexual connotation, it can also be used for any kind of second-hand excitement. So, of course, a lot of the work that Hopper, a piece that's emphasizing that is like the woman in the orange dress, not by Hopper. So, what is particularly highlighted, I suppose, in this is that you are watching this person from a point that I don't think could conceivably exist in the room that she is in. This feels like you are in the wall, several feet behind her, and the wall isn't there for you. At least that's how I kind of view this. It's just a candid look at this woman doing something. What's she doing? Again, the musculature is excellent here. Of course, that goes into Hopper's incredible attention to detail regarding studying anatomy, once more. The incredible number of artistic nudes that he drew for anatomical practice that I did have to sift through for this. But yes, things like this are a beginning of the Hopper style, right? This is an extremely Hopper thing. In some ways, the hard ends on the canvas almost, to me, look like you're peering through a crack in a door, right? It almost looks like you've got the door opened just slightly, and you're leaned up into it, and you're seeing this woman doing whatever she's doing behind that door. And this is a relatively common trope, if you will, that appears in Hopper's work. Again, look at those props. Look at everything else here. It centers this woman front and, but you don't even know what she's doing necessarily. What is she doing? What is she holding? Is that a cat? Is that a bag? Why is she in this dress? Why isn't she, not in the New York exterior? She's in the New York interior. Why is she here? What is she doing? And that's up to you, really. She feels pitiful, in my opinion. I could see that. It's whatever you feel. That's what's great about this work. You put yourself into it. I'm not saying you're pitiful, Chance, necessarily, but it's whatever you see in it. So I will move to... So she's... someone relaxing after a show. Interesting. Okay, really interesting, PK and Mono, that you said it looks like she's preparing for a show or relaxing after a show. Because that's one of the major things that Hopper does, is all of his pieces are specifically kind of the event between, or the event immediately before, the event immediately after. This is not the action at hand. Something has happened or is about to happen. I saw a quote while I was researching this stream that was something along the lines of, if you... all of Hopper's work is one long movie about America, and every painting is the beginning of a scene. Her hair's let down, so I see it as relaxing. Yeah, definitely possible. There's a certain sense of tension in all of this work, too. What's she about to do? So, while we could spend all day here, let's go ahead and move on to our next piece. This is Girl at Sewing Machine, from I think the same year as New York Interior. And this has a number of tropes of Hopper's, of course. First, the windows. There are many, many pieces of people, rather, at windows of a kind. Looking out windows. We saw that very early on in his work, and we see it again here. Once again, depictions of women are very common. She's just kind of doing her thing. Does this feel lonely to any of you? No, I don't doubt that she's repairing something, maybe sewing something. The sewing machine's even reflected on the table. That is true. Good eye. Does this feel lonely to you? I wonder. Feels isolated. Like the window light makes it feel less lonely. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, I could see that. Isolated, but not lonely. Interesting. Hold that thought. Keep that thought. This is the end of the quote-unquote struggle. It kind of reminds me of a lo-fi girl. I'm sorry for laughing. I am. I really am. That's good. That's good. Hold on to that. I like that. I like that. No, it does look like lo-fi girl, doesn't it? It's like if you flipped her. If you flipped her. Oh, how fun. Classical music to study and so too. Only what kind of isolate? When you're working on something by yourself and you're just relaxing while you do it. Yeah. I like that. I like that. Hold on to that, because that's important. That's important. So, good news, everybody. His struggle years are over. He's no longer in... Because of something, he's gonna be not in his struggle years anymore. He's gonna be in a different period now. He meets a girl. Well, technically he already met the girl. This is, Josephine Nivison, otherwise known as Jo, who, is, of course, the woman who Edward Hopper marries. So we're going to be referring to her as Jo from here forward. This is not one of Hopper's own pieces. This is actually a self-portrait by Jo herself. She is also an artist. The two of them met while they were in college, and they re-met while in Massachusetts, on a summer trip of sorts. But so they come back, and in 1924, the two of them get married. It's interesting that you say good for them. It is, honestly, anything but good for them. The two would often clash, and they weren't exactly the best fit for one another, but regardless, the two of them would be together for the rest of their lives. She was also an artist, and she introduced Edward to curators. Her introduction pretty much launched his career, after someone bought his painting. Edward apparently never thanked her for this. In an interview, she's cited as saying, women are the grateful ones, while she is sitting next to her husband. Oh, there's an ad. I'm sorry. We'll wait. I'll say everything I just said again. Pardon. How we doing, subs? How's everybody enjoying this tonight? How are we doing? I hope we're doing well. I'm having fun. I hope you're all having fun as well. It's great. I'm glad. While we're waiting for just a moment, I'm going to really quickly... Okay. Having a lot of fun? Nice. Great. I'm glad. Where were we? So... Ad is over? Nice. Thank you very much for letting me know that there was an ad. So, of course, his wife Jo is an artist, and she introduces Edward to a number of curators. And these curators actually pretty much launch Edward's career, because one of them buys a piece from him, which we will look at momentarily. Actually, here, we'll go ahead and we'll go ahead and look at this piece right now. Actually, this is the mansard roof from Edward Hopper, of course. This was one of the first pieces purchased that would be in a long series of pieces that were purchased that would have maintained steady income from him for pretty much the rest of his life. Now, of course, Josephine Nivison, his wife, introduced him to these curators, right? These curators knew about Edward because of Jo. Edward never thanked her for this, apparently. In an interview, she is cited as saying, quote-unquote, women are the grateful ones. It's not men who show the gratitude. Of course, this is a question that could relate to a number of other things as well, because, well, It's not necessarily, I want to point out, that Joe was entirely a victim within this relationship. Joe had her own set of issues. The two of them were not exactly the best fit. Um, she and he were very different from one another. They lived a kind of hermited lifestyle, or at least Edward did, and then Joe adopted it to be with him. And so where Edward would be very laid back, Joe would be very high-strung, if you will, and where Edward would have a sense of humor that would lead him to be semi-antagonistic to a degree, Joe would have no sense of humor whatsoever. And, of course, well, when there would be argument, the two of them would berate each other. Just absolutely tear into one another for extended periods of time. And the two of them really kind of got into it. The two of them did this for their entire lives. PK says, why'd they even get together? Financial reasons? Family pressure? Well, the two of them were like 40 by now. And I guess they just kind of had nothing better to do. Like, I guess it's the thing to do now. We're 40. Not meeting anyone else, I guess. So, they got together, and they were kind of unhappy with one another. However, they, I won't say they made it work, but they never got divorced. Of course, the two of them, as artists, unfortunately, Joe's art, maybe unfortunately, maybe not, Joe's art would kind of subjugate, if you will, to Edward's. And something interesting. Every female figure from here on out is Joe posing for it. Every single one. She would not let any other woman pose for Edward to, like, sketch a pose. Not once. Not a single time, it would seem. Because she was a bit of the jealous type. And that's just a little tidbit of information. I don't intend to make Edward out to be just absolutely sad tale with a bitch wife or whatever. No. He was kind of an asshole to her too. The two of them would berate each other. Let's point out, the two of them had it out for each other sometimes. Will be me. So, this is the mansard roof. This piece was purchased by a number of curators, and this maybe bought for, I want to say like $100. But this kickstarted Edward's career. He got a number of different exhibitions and retrospectives and other such things that would really serve to help the way that his work would be looked at in the public. So, right, thank this painting, thank Joe. So with the piece finally sold, Hopper could finally put illustration behind him as well. He no longer had to draw for magazines, or theater, or cinema, or whatever else. He did not have to do it anymore. He didn't do watercolor ever again, actually, if I'm not mistaken. I'm sure maybe he did it like once or twice that I can't quite find personally, but he did not do it in any major official capacity from that point forward. He did not care for it anymore. He did it for 20 years as a job, and now that he can sell paintings, he will only do that. So, he would continue to make art in his personal style for like 4 decades from this point forward. Eventually, after selling a specific piece, I believe it's 2 on the Isle, which you will look at momentarily, he was able to buy a car and regularly take trips in summers in New England. It was very nice. How about that? Him and Joe up in New England, bickering to one another and sketching one another. How about that? How cute. This is a piece made of Joe. I think it's just a light painted sketch, really. This isn't exactly a major piece from him, despite the fact that it would look like it, right? This is not a formal oil painting. From here, we also actually get another self-portrait from him. He made this self-portrait around 1925 to 1930, and this is what he looks like now. Who's that guy? Michael Keaton? Yeah, he looks like Michael Keaton. It does kind of look like a photo. Here, if I blow up the image a little more... There we go. Now you can see the bits of paint a little bit more. When you kind of compress it, it does look quite a bit like a photo. But no, he was very talented with something close to realism. He was never really one who particularly cared for exact photorealism, but he got pretty damn close, pretty consistently. He got just real enough to where you feel that you could be there. You pick a Michael Keaton through a Snapchat filter. Right? Yeah, so that's what he looked like for pretty much the rest of his life. He just kind of gets a little bit older, a little bit wrinklier over time. So that's his self-portrait. So that's just how you remember what he looks like now. And also, hi Bonnie, good to see you. Yes, self-portrait of the man, from about 1930 or so. I'm going to show you the piece that landed him a cool $1,500. This is not that piece. Why is this formatted this way? Fuck me. Pardon. Okay, it's the next one. Whoops. Okay, so here. This one is extremely extremely famous, if you will, from Hopper. This is Automat, which is depicting a woman at something of an automated restaurant. And this is one of Hopper's more stylistically consistent pieces. Notably, it has a dark color palette that almost derives a sense of foreboding around this woman here. And I know we've actually talked about this piece before on this channel. This was a random art analysis redeem in the past. And I think I didn't quite, how to put it, do it right then. I wasn't equipped with the knowledge of motif in Hopper's work to be able to really properly tell you. So this woman is in a place where feasibly there should probably be other people, right? Waiters, other such things. No, she's alone. And you're just kind of looking at her. And she's still alone. I don't exactly know why. But, well, she's not with anyone else, and she doesn't exactly look happy to be here, does she? She's looking down at her tea or her coffee. Not really acknowledging anything else. I wonder what she's thinking about. Additionally, I quite like, and one of the things that's really prevalent about Hopper's art is the cropped perspective. This is pretty close in. A fair number of other artists would blow this shot way out, and you'd see her as like maybe a tenth of the frame. Not even that. Like her and the table would be like maybe a tenth of the frame. This, however, is very clearly like meant to be about her. This is her in her own little instance of the world, alone. There are two chairs directly opposing one another. It's directly calling out that there's kind of something wrong here. She's clearly ready to go do something. She's wearing a dress under this coat. She's got her hat on. She's ready to do something. Has she been stood up as her date of sorts left? What's wrong? What's wrong with her? Or do we really have to ask? This could be anyone. At any point in time. Hello, Haro. Good to see you. Additionally, Hopper's brushwork is excellent, as per usual. I also love his composition here. I already mentioned the kind of cropped style, to where it's almost congested on the lower right-hand quadrant of this piece, which makes you look at her all the more. And when you try to leave the piece, when you try to leave her, or when you look at anywhere else on the piece, the strong lines, the strong perpendicular lines to one another will either draw you into the deep black behind her, which will naturally bring your eye to her, because, you know, she's the only thing within that deep black, or you will follow the lines of the window behind her to her. Additionally, this is another instance of something that I do want to point out, and that's that windows in Hopper's world basically don't exist. They are there, yes, but the glass does not exist. There is no discerning that it's glass. This could just as easily be a giant black pit behind her, or the street directly behind her. There's a very, very profound, very strong sense of something like loneliness here. Right? I quite like this piece. Quite a bit. If we're okay, though, I'm afraid we will have to move on, as there is still a good amount of art that I will have to bring to you one more time. And I would like to point out again, this is called Automat. If you would like to see this one again, just ask. I will show it again, if you would wish me to. So we will move forward from here. What do we have next? This piece. We're allowed a tunnel before there's a reflection. This piece is Two on the Aisle. This is the piece that Hopper sold for a cool $1,500, and this let him buy an automobile to go up to New England with Joe. How sweet. How nice. Once again, demonstrating his affinity for the theater, and affinity for kind of the high life of things. He's also kind of capturing the awkward moment in which you're waiting for someone else to stand up at a place of performance where you're done and you're ready to go leave, and then the person who you're with is still like gathering their things. It's notably still, though, an action that occurs following all of the other actions. The man here in this piece is ready to go. He's done. But the woman here is getting ready to go. Additionally, the sort of muted palette kind of robs this piece of the magic of the theater, as it were. It almost feels sterile. Done. Over. Right? And despite the fact that there are 3 people in this piece, there are no words being exchanged here. The man isn't even looking at the person who he presumably came here with, for one reason or another. A temporary estrangement, maybe, but an estrangement nonetheless. The woman, inexplicably sitting in this booth seat here, is not looking at either of our other folks, despite the fact that they seem to be the only people in this theater. She's reading. I don't know what she's reading or why she's reading it, but maybe she's waiting for the next performance? Maybe she's just reading the playbill. Who knows? I wonder why. I wonder what she's doing. Moving forward. This is another very famous Hopper. This is the piece Chop Suey. Featuring more people than there typically are. There's 4 people in this piece, actually. And even odder than that, honestly, is that they're looking at each other. They don't exactly look into it, do they? The woman in green here doesn't exactly look super about whatever the woman with the blue cap is saying here. It is a slightly different shading style indeed, yes. I would agree to that. Yeah. I think that's fair. Also lonely, when there's multiple people present. That's certainly one way to describe it, yes. I don't mean that in a condescending way. I mean that that's a perfectly valid thing to say. How is it that you can be alone in a crowd? Or even just in a one-to-one conversation, you can be alone. How odd. We will go one further. And this next piece has a bit of historical relevance, beyond just being old and also from a legendary American artist. This is House by the Railroad. This piece was actually the very first painting acquired by the Museum of Modern Art, otherwise known as the MoMA, in New York. How incredible, actually, that the very first thing that they acquired upon their, branching into paintings was the work of one Edward Hopper, who, this was painted in 1925 or so, I believe. Mere years before this, hadn't sold shit. Despite trying incredibly hard. He kind of went 0 to hero a little bit in this way. So I personally follow a few of them, but I also feel that is just me. You would not be alone in diagnosing that feeling here. It's interesting. Hello, Astro. It's very interesting that you bring it up. That it might just be you, because it's not necessarily just you. That's one of the really interesting things about Hopper's work, is the unique emptiness of them allows you to fill it. And to some, that means that they don't feel lonely when they look at Hopper's work. They feel free, even, I've seen some people say. But to others, it's a crushing loneliness. Something of a forlorn attitude, something of a abandonment and isolation. It's interesting to me to see how people fall on these lines. And there's no right or wrong way.
Swallow this.
Thank you for the hydrate, by the way. But yes, so this is, of course, House by the Railroad. And we will see this one again later. Actually, I'm going to show you this one again later. So, moving back to Jo for a moment, Hopper actually, despite her being his wife, and the fact that she would literally constantly, by her own insistence, pose for Hopper's work exclusively, he only ever actually formally painted her in an oil painting once, and that's in this piece, titled Jo Painting. Very creative name, I know. I really like the way that he captured her ponytail here. The bush of her hair. Yeah, right? I think it's very nice. There's something... It's interesting, because the two of them were incredibly antagonistic towards one another, right? But I look at this piece and I feel love. Right? A quiet admiration. A quiet respect. despite the fact that the two of them would verbally berate one another constantly and were generally not a good fit for one another, and would spend quite a bit of time apart while together. I feel love when I look at this piece. It is they had a connection. They had a connection. Someone who knows the subject well. Exactly, yes. We're on the same page here, and I'm very happy about it. She's rendered in such a... She's clearly focused on something. I would be willing to bet that she's... The attempt here was that Hopper was attempting to capture her look when she was painting. Which is... I'm going to preface what I'm about to say with, this is entirely my own personal interpretation here. The two of them met when they were both art students, right? And the first time they met, they didn't really know each other super well, but they knew each other, right? And they met again in Massachusetts on a summer trip that they were both happened to be there, right? And they're like, oh, it's you. And they met each other again. They married a year later in 1924. And this is painted, I want to say 36. Yeah, 1936. This was painted. And this is at a point when Hopper kind of has everything, for a while at least. And while the Depression is on, like the Great Depression is on, and the two of them have been together for 12 years now. To me, it feels that in the first and formal instance where he's painting her, he's not just sketching her for another woman to be in the painting. He is painting her. He is painting his wife. That he wanted to paint the instance of her that he fell in love with, which is to say, the artistic end of her. So to see her dedicated to her craft, perhaps, and maybe holding a paintbrush in her right hand, it fills me with a sense of warmth. Because to express one's love for one another is really beautiful to me. And I don't know, necessarily, how the two of them got on and how this painting went. They made it. I don't know what Hopper was thinking, because the guy was very weird in his interviews. He was very much talking about how he didn't really care for symbolism, and he just kind of wanted to do the technical stuff a bunch, and he... I kind of think he's lying. It's paintings like these, which so clearly use the extreme close-up crop to highlight her, Joe's kind of expression here, that make me think that the man definitely had it on his mind. And, of course, to bring it to the wider question at hand. Right? The way that he's using the crop to suggest that she is doing some sort of just some sort of action out of frame is interesting. And appreciate more mythical symbols. Objects pursue a meaning. I think that's fair. I think that's maybe something he would get behind. But I like this piece. It's uniquely Hopper, but it's also uniquely about love. And I love that. Because god damn it, I might be a villain. I might be cold sometimes. But god damn it, I love love. I didn't mean for that to hit with the music so well. Let's continue on. So, the Great Depression was on by this point. And it was... McCrae. The Great Depression was on by this point. But Edward Hopper and Joe Hopper actually did kind of just fine because they managed to maintain the clout very, very consistently. So he was still getting consistent sales all throughout this time because he wasn't necessarily like banking on people who were like super rich, and he wasn't super rich himself, so like the money he had in the bank didn't really matter all that much because he didn't have a ton of it. He kind of lived within his means. Like the biggest thing he ever bought was a car. So of course, well, maybe not the biggest thing he ever bought, but like it was a really big deal that he bought a car so he could go take trips with his wife. They rented a cottage or whatever. Like, he was rich, but he wasn't like uber rich to where it didn't really affect him a ton. So yeah, he was getting all kinds of celebration all across New York, all across America, really. He was the shit. In 1939, he was the shit. Right? They were rent a cottage every summer in Cape Cod, and significant quantities of work were produced there. A bunch of sketches, right? Because the guy made a billion fucking sketches. But of course, you know, despite his extremely involved process of millions of sketches being made for every single one, basically, and preparing every possible inch of the canvas, and ultimately planning the piece inside, Hopper had a very productive 1930s and 40s. You know, just to name a few, right? I'm not even going to say everything he did in this period of time, because he made like 5 paintings a year, which is way less than a lot of other people, but he made a lot of bangers that sold for a lot. He kept himself afloat with this, basically. And what we see here is actually the painting that is also behind me, and that is New York Movie, which is yet again exhibiting a degree of appreciation for the theater and whatnot as well. Yet again, that classic forlorn woman who she's got something wrong. She's clearly thinking about something. Additionally, it is a deliberate choice to make this scene as lonely as it is, or as perhaps barren as it is of people. Because at this time, I want to point out again, it was like the late 30s or the 20s when he made, or it was, you know, it was the 30s to 40s when he made this. People were going to the movies fucking constantly. There are 3 people in the audience. It is a deliberate choice to make this scene as empty as it is. And I wonder what that says about our subject, the blonde here. She's not enjoying the movie, but what happened to making her not enjoy the movie? Or not even necessarily for the movie's sake that she's not enjoying the movie, it just seems that she's not enjoying the movie because something must have happened. Is she in an argument? Is she upset? What's wrong? I wonder what's wrong. And that's one of the lovely things about Hopper's art that I'm actually going to iterate on now. What I love about Hopper's art is it's not a suggestion of a story. It is the story. It is the whole story. In this piece in particular, something clearly must have happened to upset this woman or otherwise trouble this woman, and she is now, instead of going ahead and going to watch the film that she and or her partner paid for to be here to do, she is instead sulking. And for what? What is she sulking for? The movie is on. Is she gonna go back and watch more of the movie? Is this a talking picture? Are people aware of her? I wonder. I do wonder. Stupid comment incoming. She's waiting for her movie partner to get back from the powder room. She didn't want to see the movie without them. That's some ride or die behavior right there. I love this piece. Also, again, Hopper's fascination with light is on full display here. Artificial light in particular he quite likes. And the way that the theater is illuminated very dimly, as well as the way that she is illuminated among that light. Like, it is a place with a subject. Like a movie theater is a place with a subject, right? And that's the stage. And in this piece, despite the stage and the screen being visible, it's not the point. It's not the subject. It's about people. In this specific case, there's a lot of other things as well, but it's about people. I like this one a lot. We'll go ahead and move ahead. This is a New York movie. If you would like to see this again. I'll also, I said I'd do it last time with the Hokusai stuff, but this time I will actually post a zip file of all of the work exhibited here this evening in my Discord. If you're not in the Discord, you can use !Discord and go ahead and get in there, and it's going to be after the stream in the Discussed Art channel. Fuck me. 1 second, everyone. I have to add another folder to something really quickly. Whoopsie daisy. It's like a top 10 piece for you? Nice. I like it a lot too. Let's just go ahead and sift through really quickly. So... Oh god, I really hope this one... Let me... Okay, thank fuck. Alright. I had to make sure. I had to make sure that the censorship worked. I had to make sure it went through. This is a piece called Girly Show, which earlier on in the stream I denoted as being a piece that was specifically, or partially at least, made in response to a desire in the late 30s, early 40s for specific decency leagues to begin to outlaw burlesque and burlesque shows. And so this is a direct response to that, because Edward Hopper is something of a contrarian. He does not go with the artistic trend of the time of moving to abstraction. He does not care for prohibition. He does not care for not having French pimps in the city. Don't ask. And then he also really doesn't care for banning burlesque. He is a textbook contrarian. He's a hater for real, and that's kind of funny. What's other fun, cute information about this is that Jo, notably Josephine, is 60 years old at this time. She posed for this piece. This is maybe a 29-year-old person who, if you saw the whole thing, her age would be apparent, if that makes sense. She doesn't exactly have the, wear and tear that age does to a feminine body, if you will. So, right, Jo insisted on posing for this as well. And there are actually studies made for this specific one to get the form just right. Just a fun little piece of information. Really, I'm mostly just showing this to give you the piece of information about Jo posing for it, because I think it's funny the way that their relationship works, even when arguably the product might be better if someone else posed for it, because it might be a more accurate example. Jo would not let him. Moving on. Here's the big one. It's Nighthawks. Everyone knows this piece. Maybe. Maybe you don't. That's okay if you don't. This is Nighthawks. This is widely considered to be Hopper's masterpiece. He painted this in the 30s and 40s. I think it was 1942. I'm actually not going to go into this one just yet. I'm not going to tell you about this piece just yet. So I'm actually going to move on from it. We're going to come back. Babies were born with innate knowledge of this piece. I'm going to move on from this because I'm going to revisit it later. Okay? This is Hotel Lobby, which touches on all those same delicious hopper notes. Look at that. So, the dark palette, the use of light, the use of stark light and dark dark, the use of color, of course. We have, I'm pretty sure, actually every primary color used in this piece as well. There's the, or used in this piece's palette, rather. So liminal. Yeah, that is a way that you could describe a lot of Hopper's work, is liminal for a different time. And the man's even looking at her. Yes, the three people in this piece appear rather indifferent to one another, or at the very least, not exactly on the best terms with one another. Right? The blonde here doesn't seem to care. The couple, the elderly couple, appear to have something of a rather similar to the three people in the theater. Yes, exactly. Yes, this is a motif. The elderly couple have a degree of strain on one another, clearly. It seems that he is wishing that she would get a move on of sorts, and he's looking clean past her. She seems to be looking at him, but not exactly in a positive way. Additionally, this shot has some really nice lines about it, too. I quite like. You try to look, how it's translation. Where'd you get that idea, Hopper? You're ahead of me, Mono. I like it. The lines in this piece I really appreciate. If you trace the straight lines, they all kind of lead back in some way to this elderly couple. Much in the same way, actually, that seemingly, if these two were in the same room as you, you might be inclined to look at them too. Because there's a chance that this elderly woman is making something of a scene. She's maybe talking to her husband in a way that's not exactly nice, or her husband is being perhaps unfair in some way, and you just kind of can't help but look at them. And what I find to be really lovely is that all lines lead to them, which is just so fun. I love that. He's so clever in his composition, and particularly in the way that he uses lines. I'm actually gonna, just in case, I'm gonna bring up my pointer here. So, like, okay, let's say we start looking at the painting right here, right? Eyes going down, here, here, here. Oh, look at that, there's a guy. Oh, what's this? Okay. Oh, she's looking at him. I wonder why that is. And maybe... Oh, she's kind of a line, too. Oh, what's this? And, you don't really get a line over to her. I guess you could go, like you go like that. But I think she really stands out because of the fact that she's blonde, right? That's a very different color compared to the colors that are around her. And she kind of sticks out. And there's something about it, the appearance of youth, comparatively. Maybe the youth just doesn't seem to care about the squabblings of the elderly. Maybe that's what this means. Who knows? Moving forward, of course. Another censored one. This is Morning in a City. It sure is morning. And you want to talk voyeurism. This is it. This is a nude woman who's seemingly just woken up, looking out her window, out into New York City. And she is, of course... Well, I guess I shouldn't say of course, because I don't really know what she is. Is she ready for the day? Is she forlorn? Is she unenthused about what she has to do today? There's really no way into this piece as well, which I find interesting. It's just her. She stands stark in the middle of her room. Well, of course she's not ready for the day quite yet. She's in the nude, but, like, I mean mentally. What's she thinking about? What are her responsibilities? She seems single. That bed is awfully small. I wonder what she does. And again, the light shines on her beautifully, too. It is so measured. So very specific. So very tactile, too. I love that. Before Twitch catches on to what we're doing, though, we should move forward. So each of these pieces took multiple different sketches to produce, right? Hopper's workflow, generally speaking, operated on the basis that he would work in such a way that he would sketch out every little instance of the piece, right? Every prop, every chunk of light, every little thing, every character, multiple times. Multiple times. And that results in many of his, like a ton of studies about his work. Not external studies, but there would be studies about the things that were going to be put into each painting. Allow me to show you this study of New York Movie. This was a pre-made piece that was supposed to be practice of sorts for Hopper's work on New York Movie. This is obviously one of the much later studies. This is far more put together, very much so. Very similar to the final product, actually. There aren't a ton of differences outside of shading weight, and of course, obviously, having color. But Hopper's abilities, with and without color, very much shine through here. He doesn't really need the color. It's very much helpful, of course, and very much provides a degree of contrast, but it works just the same. This piece works just the same, despite the fact that it is, of course, a piece of preparatory work. Again, much later on in the process, clearly, but the idea is clearly very formed. Every instance here would have had its own study. Like, the different seats likely had their own study. The staircase maybe not had its own study, but like the lamp there almost certainly was sketched at least 10 times by Hopper. Hopper was anal about his details, and that's why his work is so the way it is. So almost hyper-real. It's because he had so much attention to the way that things looked. Of course, he would unfortunately slow his pace in the mid-40s as he did get to the mid to late 40s, as he would suffer a degree of illness of the prostate, and his productivity would dip in the 50s and 60s, but this didn't stop him from making other notable work, of course. Allow me to show you First Row Orchestra. This is the worst quality image I have ever shown anyone. And we're not looking at First Row Orchestra, I'm sorry. How about this one? This is the piece Morning Sun. This one is arguably pretty famous from Hopper as well. And it has a lot of the basic tropes. There is a window that is open, that is barely even perceptible that it's a window, right? There's no glass there. But there's a woman peering directly out of it on her bed. She doesn't look happy. It's very similar to Morning in a City. But so what Hopper would say about this piece is that he didn't really care for anything else in it. He just really cared about painting light on things. A true contrarian, a true impressionist in that way, I suppose. But Hopper was particularly invested in the painting of light, as you can see, as it moves across this dynamic pose and this interesting piece of figure of this specific subject. Also, there's a unique kind of emptiness to her walls. And there's a unique form of claustrophobia, in a way, too, that I feel in this piece. Her bed is extremely close to the window, the wall, if you will. And to me, it almost gives a feeling of like a lifeboat. Here, I'll make it a little bit smaller so that I'm not including it. But Oh, I see. Actually, hold on. No, her. Pardon me. I was actually covering up kind of pivotal information about the perspective of this piece with my silly little sleeve there. I apologize. This piece is very much that moment where you just don't want to leave. You don't know where to go either, you know? So let me ask you again about this one, chat, if you don't mind. Does this feel lonely to you? Does it? Looks cozy to me. Interesting. Okay. I haven't heard that before. To me, this pensive. I like that. Not as much as the yellow hat girl. Okay. Yes, Automat is much more lonely, indeed. It's yours and yours, and that's not the same. Yeah. I kind of noticed read Hopper's and Block of Isolation, but they usually look cozy or inviting to me. That's lovely. I did kind of point out that some people feel a sense of freedom or a sense of comfort in these pieces as well. I don't exactly know what the difference is, you know? Because it's kind of down to the person, of course. I like pensive. I do. I don't necessarily read it as entirely lonely. I don't think she's longing for anyone else to be here. I just think she's thinking about something else. And I keep asking, does this feel lonely? Because the truth is that it's kind of hard to find a piece of Hopper's work that is explicitly lonely. Despite the fact that his loneliness gets conflated with his work constantly, it's hard to find something that's purely lonely. Yeah, looking for things that's built by a person. Yeah, she's alone. She's potentially sad about something. I don't think that's the face of a happy person necessarily. But, it just kind of is. She's just existing. No thoughts, head empty. Interesting thoughts all around, everyone. Thank you very much. This is inviting because the colors and lighting time of day. Yeah, it's morning. It's a new beginning, if you will. Let's go ahead to our next piece, Hotel by a Railroad. People talking about also thinking sunlight, the shining air, but the living stillness of this work's... Actually, I'm going to go back. The living stillness of this work always reminds me of Dishiriko. I'm not familiar off the top of my head. Maybe I am. Maybe I would be if I saw one of them just briefly. But I think I like that thought. I almost feel like I can feel the sunlight shining. Yeah, the color of the dress is quite nice too, and of course his attention to lighting is incredible. But we've gone over this. Here is this is Hotel by a Railroad. So this is, two folks who are in a transient place, a hotel, and they seem to be preparing in some way. So here's the question. Are these people coming or going? Are they coming or are they going? What's this man doing? What if they're waiting? I certainly think they could be waiting. He seems to be smoking, maybe. She's reading a book. She's in the sunlight. He's looking at the window, but the window seems to be precluded by another train or maybe not a train, but another building on the other side. It feels like they're waiting. I could agree to that. Would you say that this is before or after something happening? And I keep asking this. I'm sorry. I do keep asking this, but it's something that I like to bring up. Is this before or is it after anything in particular? If there is a climax to this story, has it happened already or is it going to happen? She's got "I ain't leaving the house today, Gerald" written all over. What I really love about Hopper's work, I suppose, is how... There's donuts, so he's waiting for the DoorDash guy. Is how different it is to everyone else, or to any other person. Anyone can have their own individual interpretation of any piece like this, right? Something's happened. Maybe they're... Like, you can project. They're waiting for some news, so maybe later. She's emotionally preparing for one of her donuts to be wrong. Feels like they're waiting for some news. Yeah, okay. Okay, yeah. I'm inclined to say it is after something, since the sun appears to be setting. There's stillness to me. It's hard to tell the when of... Yeah! Yes! Hopper paints establishing shots, if you will. To put it into film terms. Hopper paints establishing shots. He paints the first shot of any scene. The opening, if you will. The moment of transience, when anything could happen from here forward in this scene. And it is up to you, viewer, to fill in the gap about what you think about this piece. These could be anyone. If I told you to make a D&D character about any given one of these people that I've shown you today, this blonde behind me, that lady in the chair, guy with the cigarette, is that a cigarette? Maybe it's a cigarette. Guy in front of the window. You could tell me any number of things. No two people would have the same interpretation. And that's what's great about this artist, is he has such a specific denotation, but he also is so open in the same way. It can mean many different things to many different people. And while some art is very much about the artist himself in some capacity, what I find really intriguing is that Hopper is about you. Hopper is about you and the people you know and the stories that are in your head. You can fill in the gap. Let's go to this next one. Oh. Little old me. This piece is called Intermission. You're such an eloquent intelligence. I appreciate that. Oh, it throws you for a bit of a loop. Oh. This one turns out the waiting to 100. What do you feel here? I, personally, get a profound sense of boredom. Which is interesting. Because she's at a theater, is she not? This is the opposite of boredom. This is the most boredom-averse place in New York. It's a theater. You're supposed to feel fun here. Even the lines drag on and on. She forgot daylight savings. Shit, I'm early. Oh, hell no. I get a sense of anxiety. Like, why is she here all by herself? Is she okay? Well, it's intermission, and she didn't want any snacks, apparently. Well, that's what I'm saying. There's always, she got stood up. She came alone. There's many different things that you could describe this as. Maybe it's not even an intermission. You know, they said what the title was, but I don't necessarily know if that's always reliable. maybe about time of day, sure, but I don't know. This feels like you're waiting for something to begin. Is she an employee? Maybe. I don't think she's necessarily an employee, though, in this specific case. I would argue that she's wearing something that is, I would argue that she's wearing something of a nightgown? Not nightgown, night wear, evening wear, fun and flirty, as it were, for the 40s, 50s. This was painted. When was this painted? This is in '63, actually. Hold on, now I'm thinking about it. Something fun and flirty. Someone with a really crappy cast, and she came because she got her tickets for free. She's trying to be a good friend, but damn, these people suck. Very fancy for '63. Not in those heels. Yeah, no, I think that's fair. You know what's interesting? I'm the person who sits during intermission, generally. I don't typically like to get up. Maybe, I don't know, a cigarette girl or something. Possible. I suppose, you know, Astro could, but more tardy than she's dressed, if I recall. You know, I like that. I like that, Astro. I think there's definitely a possibility there. If that's how you want to read this, then absolutely, that's the story you can tell about this piece. She could totally be a cigarette girl, and her intermission is actually just completely in between shifts, in between shows. How about that? Maybe it's not referring to the intermission of the show itself, but the intermission of her work. That could be something. You could read it like that. That's the lovely thing about Hopper, is that all of these interpretations are completely valid. And you know what? Some fucking art snob is going to tell you, no, this is what this means. Fuck them. Fuck that asshole, dude. If anyone tries to tell you that your version of how you read art is wrong, don't listen to them. Ever. However it impacts you, and whatever elicits an emotional response from you, from a piece of art, that's you. That's important to you. If it's important, if you don't fucking listen to them. So, like, some fucking asshole could come in here and be like, actually, intermission is about this. No, there's an ad. Fuck. We'll hold. Yeah, don't let anyone fucking come into your life and say the way that you're reading that art is completely wrong. Like, don't let anyone do that to you. Not that I think you will, but like, there's such a... I think particularly about paintings, there is something of a cult, if you will, about art, to where there is one right way. There is only a handful of correct experiences that have to be given eloquently and properly. And what I like about Hopper and Hopper's work is that it invites you, to me, to put yourself into it. So I don't think there's a right way. I think it's incredibly hard to make the note that there is something inherently right about any given way to look at Hopper's art. Correct is also less fun and very impersonal. Exactly. I like to consider artistic intent as well, typically when I analyze things, but what's more correct to you than the first thing you think of, and what makes you cry? You know? That's what art is. It elicits feeling. But so, we are reaching the end of our chronological exploration of Edward Hopper. This is not quite the end of the stream, of course, I would like to point out, but we are reaching the end of our time exploring Hopper's life. The last 40 years of his life are rather similar. He has some illnesses for the last 20, but with this, allow me to show to you the final piece, the final painting that Hopper ever made. Behold, chat, This is the piece, Two Comedians. It is emblematic of many things that have been prevalent over Hopper's career. The first of which, there is a man and a woman, both of which were very, very likely posed for by Hopper and Joe themselves. He doesn't. He obviously posed for the man, and Joe posed for the woman. And the two of them are taking a bow as they leave this stage. They're taking a bow, and they are about to walk off stage into the foliage and into the dark. The unspeakable dark behind them. These two performers, these two artists, are leaving it all behind. They're going on. They're moving from here. Whether that's to yet another performance, yet another day, or that's to the great, dark, beautiful beyond. That's up to you. And regardless, this was Curtain Call, unfortunately, for Edward Hopper. Although, what a way to go out, right? A swan song like this, perfectly exhibiting something of a acceptance of death. What a way to go out. I can't exactly say I'm sad. It looked like he did it his way. You know? It's almost like he knew, yeah. I mean, his productivity took a big dip in his last few years. Probably had one left in him. The man died in 1967, and this was finished in 1966. No, pardon me, I was wrong. 1965. And of course, for the incredible amount of time that he would spend on each given painting, he probably didn't have another one in him. Maybe he had some stuff cooked up, ready to go in a final piece, but this is his final completed work. There's a degree of finality in a lot of his later work, which we just saw in 1963 with Intermission, in 1965 with Two Comedians. His later work has a certain appreciation, certain occupation with the end. Waiting for the end. Going through the motions of the end. So I think he knew. Personally. Could mean anything to you, though. I ain't gonna tell you no. But, so, this concludes our chronological exploration of Edward Hopper. However, we're not done, I would like to point out. There is still more that I would like to explore about Edward Hopper, particularly about themes of his work and his influence. Well, for both him and his wife, since there's a man and a woman both dressed in white, we're happy that 90% of the women are true, which isn't saying much. So, I am going to present unto you 3 different major themes that I have kind of honed in on as something that's been very important in Hopper's work. And we are going to look at a few pieces that particularly exemplify those. And some of these you've seen before, some of these are going to be new to you. But after we look at these 3 themes, we are going to re-examine Nighthawks. And that will be what we end on before going to our section on influence. There is a reason that Nighthawks is considered his masterpiece. And I feel that we should only tackle that once we know exactly what makes Hopper tick. Artistically. Piece of while you're up, I'm trying to make sure the censorship was there I didn't recognize. I think I missed it while you were grabbing something. It looked like a woman on a beach. Would you go back to the... Yeah. Here, actually, I can do that for you. Let me actually really quickly. I'll find it for myself real quick. Woman on a beach. Okay, I think I see it. Is it... this one. This is a sketch of Joe, or this is a piece, not exactly a formal piece, but this is Joe sketching on the beach at Good Harbor. Another piece of his wife. He didn't necessarily, formally paint her in an oil painting, but this might be watercolor. This might just be something along those lines. This is not a formally produced and she knows it's a Koroks. Like the outfit she's wearing. It is nice, isn't it? Very comfy. So, thank you all for sticking with me thus forth. If you'll stick with me for a little bit more hoity-toity stuff for just a moment, then we can look at Nighthawks, and that's the real juicy stuff, right? So, I have 3 major themes I would like to impart unto you about Hopper's work that I think are very important. The first of which is interpersonal dejection. This can count for a wide variety of things. But first, there's a certain quote from Edward Hopper that I'd like to impart unto you before we do this. He said the following. He said, "If you can say it in words, you wouldn't need to paint it." Which I think is beautiful. Because there's something, not even beautiful per se, but apt. It's very apt. Because it very clearly describes his work, actually. There's a certain, for lack of a better term, indescribable nature about the way that he makes his work. And I think that's lovely, that he would do that, that he would say that. So, moving into this, let's look at what had to be painted. And the first thing we're going to be looking at is someone who often describes, find the right words to things, is kind of beautiful. Yeah. Let's first discuss interpersonal dejection. Now, you've seen this piece before. This is Couple near Poplars. This was painted in Paris. And I'd like to go over some of his history again in a little bit more detail. Joe and Edward spent quite a bit of their relationship in silence, actually. They didn't really connect to one another, particularly. And you can feel that in Hopper's work. It is almost too apparent, the dejection that exists between married or otherwise affiliated opposite-sex couples. Right? It is palpable to feel Hopper's marital issues and his issue with intimacy in this time. Particularly in this piece known as Room in New York. I love this piece. I really, really do. This woman here is prepped to go out for a night on the town. She's got a night dress on. She's idling by the piano, and our man here is reading the newspaper after seemingly just taking off his jacket. The two of them clearly seem to have different ideas as to how they are going to spend their evening this evening. And there's quite a story to be told here, but I think the core of it could be related to Hopper himself. Tension that he felt in his own relationship, of which he really had the one. That's the definition of marriage, because they were just kind of expected to in those times. Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's also go ahead and look at Hotel Room again. This is a different hotel room. We won't want to leave it either. So this isn't necessarily about dejection regarding a romantic party, but this woman looks defeated in a way to me. She looks sad, doesn't she? She is alone in this room, and she's reading something. But she's turned away from the light. She's semi-nude. She's just completely there. This cramped room. Messy room. This hotel room, that is. It seems like she was gonna travel somewhere with someone, but they don't seem to be there with her now. This could be a time of great fun, but it's not. Or this one. And do you want to talk relationship issues in a painting? Look at this. This one is called Summer Evening. This is from 1947. This piece is... look at her. The two of them are just not even close to each other. Or into each other. They're not about it. She clearly doesn't really seem to like him very much. Let's feel this world, you are both of them, I guess. And yet again, this was some odd 23 years after he married Jo. This kind of like the one of the underlying themes regarding relationships in Hopper's work is that the people in his work don't talk to one another about anything. They don't talk at all. These two are kind of body language on the setting is what I vibe with the most. No, the setting is lovely here. I really love the way this looks. This is a scene that plenty of people have been in before, right? This could be such a nice little moment. Isn't that it was meant to be a character, like on a camera piece through the plant and yeah. It's interesting you say that, Bonnie, because that kind of gets to a different sentiment that I will be bringing up momentarily, the kind of voyeurist sentiment about Hopper's work, of being a fly on the wall, if you will, about any given moment in time. But yeah, look at this. Their body language and the way they're looking, they don't seem to like each other. They look like they're about to break up to me. But we won't see that yet. That's not what he's into doing. Of course, let's go ahead and see our last one, which will really kind of hopefully hammer home the personal dejection. Fuck. 1 second. I have to, I knew you'd rather gone to the game alone, Brad. Well, maybe I would. Let me re-add the directory to this because I had to censor this one. Whoopsie daisy. Whoopsie. Whoop. And here it is. This piece is called Excursion into Philosophy. Hell of a name. Hell of a name. This man, though... Like, this lady's got her whole ass out. Like, let me just tell you what's under that little censorship thing I had to put there. She's got her whole ass out. And this man is just not into it. Something's wrong. Immanuel Kant just wrecked this man's libido. He's looking into something else. He read a book, or he's thinking about something else, or he's otherwise not communicating. There's something between these two people that is preventing them from being in this moment together. There is rarely an instance where two people in Hopper's work will ever be in a moment together. I'm trying to read and all these women are distracting me. But yes. There's a few kind of quotes I took away from this when I was gathering images for this. There's the phrase, "You can be alone in the most crowded place in the world." Or even in a relationship, you can be alone. Or that, well, feelings of isolation are really, really commonplace in Hopper's work. And what's interesting is whether or not they are either combated or exacerbated, depending on your view of it, by the presence of other people within this art. Whether or not this piece is comfortable or not, I think partially can come down to the other people there. Because maybe to you, this guy turns back over and cuddles with his wife and spends a nice morning hanging out there. Maybe he gets up and he leaves. Maybe he goes to work. Who knows what he does? That's up to you. So that will be the end of the interpersonal dejection section. And we will now be going into a section that I am calling Loneliness with a question mark at the end of it. Because I'm not entirely convinced that it's entirely lonely. Lonely is one word you could use. But Hopper's work is not easily described. And it's certainly not easily described as lonely. So it's lonely with a question mark. So, let's begin. I have two pieces for you in this one. The first is early Sunday morning, which is the closest I am going to getting TOS'd here. So, this piece sees a woman, again, alone, in a room of a kind, looking out at little slippers, yeah, looking out a window into the city, as it shines in on her. I describe someone who's like, no, it's fine. No, it's... you don't have to know why. That's the great thing. You don't have to know why it does that to you. You can be a weird art snob, or like a weird art nerd like me, and try to figure out why you want to describe something that way. Or if you've come around and you're like, I think this is cozy to me, then great. I'm happy for you. But so... like, I'm not saying you're wrong for saying it's lonely. That's a perfectly valid way to describe it. But each one has a little bit different stuff. You know what I mean? You're not wrong. I'm not remotely attempting to say here, Astra, that you're wrong for thinking what you did, or saying what you did. You're allowed to say that. Hell, I'd say it. There's a reason I'm having a whole section called Loneliness with a question mark. It's kind of lonely, but it's kind of not. So, Hopper's figures very frequently will evoke a form of empathy, right? It's not just sadness in this piece, or pensiveness, or being forlorn, or waiting for something. It's a picture of that. It's a picture of sadness. It's a picture of being forlorn. It's a picture of waiting. Right? It's not quite that thing incarnate. It's an instance of that occurring. And that's what's lovely. It isn't attempting to inherently be sad. It's just, it has a sad thing happening. According to you, at least. Depending on you. It's not inherently a sad thing. It's just a picture of sadness. Now, what's interesting, I feel more cozy loneliness. I think that works with only one person somehow feel cozy and works with multiple people in my opinion. Yeah. Her hair is also very nicely rendered here, I agree. So, one of the interesting things to me about Hopper's work And this is the piece 11 a.m. Or is this early Sunday morning? No, okay, this is... What the hell? Well, that's annoying. Okay, so the one before was early Sunday, was 11 a.m., and this one is early Sunday morning. So, this piece, early Sunday morning, is just warm, but it's empty. There's no one here. This place where people should be is empty. It's the same kind of feel. It's a liminal space, almost. Everyone's at church, so no one's downtown yet. Definitely possible. It could be. Absolutely could be. So, one of the things that leads me to not exactly subscribe immediately to the term lonely, at least in my own personal interpretations of a lot of this art, is that Edward Hopper himself was a deeply introverted man. Like, deeply so. He didn't really go out for a lot. He was something of a hermit, really. And he was, even by those who did know him, contemporaries or his wife, there are no... within Sunday... This is true. This is true. This is just one lady doing her thing. Yes, this is just a question of just a warmly lit downtown area. Yeah. Oh, pardon me. The people who knew him described him as someone who was almost hermit-like in some ways. He very much preferred to be alone. So it's almost that he would describe it, and his colleagues would describe it less as loneliness and more as solitude. Because that's something one could enjoy, solitude, right? I enjoy a little bit of solitude every now and again. Hopper seemed to really enjoy his solitude. Maybe, and let me read to you a quote from Hopper to make this next point. Great art is the outward expression of the inner life in an artist, and this inner life will result in his personal vision of the world. To me, there are two ways to read this, with this quote in mind. Either the places and the people that he depicts are in states of solitude because he would prefer that, and either, oh, there's no people, this is more appealing to me, or, oh, there's no people, this is miserable. So him putting himself into this work makes me almost think that he more so would appreciate this sense of no one there. Of course, this can't be said for all of his work, particularly the ones in daytime are more so about the instance of, that's nice, but the ones at night are rather different. I wonder. Again, it's up to you. I can see the isolation in a lot of these, but also an air of introspection. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, this will conclude our brief section of loneliness, ? And now, we will enter into our final thematic section on voyeurism. So, first and foremost, Hopper loves depicting characters who don't know that the camera is there, right? Or that the viewer is there. He also loves characters looking out windows. Like a lot. This is Night on the L Train. This is another etching of his from a period of 1915 to 1920 something. And I find myself very drawn to this. Because these two actually seem kind of intimate for once. How nice. But, of course, there's a viewer here. almost kind of spoiling their moment a little bit. You feel like you're there in this car and you're looking at them doing whatever they're about to be doing. Of course, it holds true to the same sentiment of, there's something that hasn't happened yet versus there's something that will happen. But you're still there, watching them do their thing. That they would probably be doing without you there, as well. Additionally, let's go ahead and look at this next one. This one will be... One does feel like one is intruding, right? You want to talk intruding? Allow me to show you night windows. This piece was particularly inspired by his experiences riding the L train from before, in which he could see into the windows of people, and he found it to be a particularly interesting instant of the odd way that you could kind of get glimpses into people's lives. Of course, there's a reason I describe it as voyeurism as opposed to as opposed to people watching. Rear window ass painter? That's interesting you say that. But yes, the voyeuristic intention is very funny. And in some ways, he was kind of afraid of being creeped on himself or attacked himself. And that's partially why I think paintings like this exist. That at nighttime, you aren't entirely safe to him. He was kind of anxious in this way. So, of course, a lot of his work is based on specific times of day. As I've just kind of described, morning is far nicer than nighttime typically is to him. So a lot of the subjects of his work are in front of or behind windows. Windows are a constant, not even a constant per se, but like a very, very common motif within Hopper's work. He paints people around windows constantly, like literally all the time. This person, you're looking through a window at their ass. Us in the outside world, right? And what's so interesting too is that Hopper's way of painting windows is to basically not treat them as there. There is almost no distinction to them being there. Very, very much differently to his contemporaries of the time. Think Norman Rockwell, for example, who had very, very interesting, detailed ways of texturing his windows. Whereas Hopper just doesn't bother. They're just open. They're holes. Portals for Hopper. You see the windows of the eyes? Yeah, the window is a metaphor. He didn't love metaphors, but yes, I suppose it is. Let me show you this last one here I have in this brief section. This piece titled Looking Out. This piece is interesting to me because you look through her window and then your gaze passes her and goes out the other side of that window. It is a double window. That's lovely to me. I like that. Additionally, she herself is looking out at something else. What's she looking at? Was she looking for something in this drawer that maybe she's rummaging through and then she just looked up and saw something of interest? What's she seeing? Is there some sort of danger? She seems a little tense. I wonder what's wrong. He looks like a predator. I think what I want to highlight in the sort of voyeuristic, like savannah cat, what I kind of want to highlight in the voyeuristic aspect of his work is that, well, his work is kind of about people watching sometimes. It's about behavior, and the prompting of that behavior, the tells toward other behavior, or the aftermath of behavior. And part of that is seeing how people look from a window. You found that really neat. And I do too, personally. Maybe less than he does, but I like it. I like the cut of his jib. It's... actually, hold on, I'll show this again. You pass through the painting in much the same meticulous way that Hopper made it. Your eye passes through each individual layer, like in this specific one, like piercing straight through it. I also look at Pinch through windows. A lot of people do. That's an operating system. But yeah, so this concludes our brief thematic section, and I will now, how to say, cut the shit. And let's talk about the one that you really are here for. Behold, Nighthawks. This one needs little introduction. Painted in 1942, this piece is legendary to a certain extent. This piece is unbelievably influential, and is likely the only reason that I am making today's stream. Because ultimately, the kind of the thing about it is that it is Hopper. It is definitively Hopper. Let me illuminate a little more about this. I'm actually going to make it bigger, so I don't need to be entirely in frame. Get a look at this. Seen so many remakes of this one? Yeah. So, this piece shows 4 people in a diner of sorts. And they are they're there, but they're not really interacting with one another. This is that dejection that we saw in a lot of Hopper's other work. These people, even in almost every kind of relationship, aren't really engaged with one another to any degree. Particularly, I would like to highlight the couple here. Their hands almost touch, but they aren't. The man is holding a cigarette and the woman is inspecting something on her nail. The two of them might be together, but at least in this exact moment, there is something of estrangement. The soda hop here, the waiter, if you will, he is spacing out. He is completely and totally staring out the window. He has no inclination toward the people who are here unless they were to speak to him. But as we know, people do not speak in Hopper's work, which means that our waiter here is kind of pointless in this instance. And the man over there, he's completely alone in this case. He's clearly had some kind of night, and he's here now, but he's not connected to any of these other people. And what's that one glass right there on the table? Let me get my pointer up. What's that glass? What's with that? Is that for us? Everyone's in their own world. Exactly. Everyone is absorbed in their own thing. Someone just left? Possible. Certainly so. Additionally, another small detail I like about this piece, if we really zoom in, the woman here, her cup is steaming. It's very new. However, the man, his cup is cold. He may have been here for a while, and she just got here. And he's disappointed that she took so long. I wonder what that could mean. Additionally, Isaac did bring it up briefly, momentarily beforehand. Let me bring it up again, though. This diner has no doors. You can't get in here! That one door likely leads to the kitchen. You can't enter this place! You aren't allowed to be here. You don't get to come in. The only way you get to go in is through this window. You get to see into these people's lives for but a moment, and you get to look right back out to the street that you're on. The street that we stand on. We're alone here still. They're in there, and we're out here. But is it necessarily better to be in there? These four are completely dejected from one another, really. There's kind of no reason to be in there. Although it's tempting. The light, the warmth that does emanate from this place, the potential of the interpersonal warmth, it does kind of call to you, doesn't it? It makes you feel like you want to be there. Maybe you don't need to be there. Maybe it's not better than being where you are, but you want to be there. There's potential there. There's no one out here. That store across the way, that cash register is completely empty. There's nothing out here. There's no one. The only thing that can remotely resemble human connection to you right now is inside Philly's. And you can't get in. For just 5 cents, they're 2 for 99 these days. Man in the Hat is a hard-boiled detective, and the woman with him is the widow of the murdered movie producer. The man with his back to us is a federal agent, but no one knows it yet. This is not a joke. Iron just tries to fill in everyone's story. I like that. There's some dude. There, wait, dang it. Ikamopi emo mentality. Now, so that's one way to look at this piece. There are other ways to look at this piece. And they aren't exactly happier. But there is another way to look at this piece. But first, let's talk about the creation of this. Let me talk about its composition. Nighthawks is a very, very well-made piece of work. This much is obvious, but let me tell you about the way that line is used here, because I particularly enjoy it. So, its specific composition follows these lines. The line at the top of the diner, the line lining the very top of the diner, the line lining the bottom of the diner, and the very bottom of the diner. These all converge at a point over here off the screen, at some point off the screen. Right? This is to imply something of emptiness, because you cannot see where these points actually converge with one another. So, what this does is it leads your eye off into the distance, briefly, and then you are led right back to Philly's. This place traps you, very literally. There is no escape. All roads within this painting lead back to Philly's. It is designed to do that. The lines are made to bring you back. And through this, and also the illumination of light coming out of it being the only way that this street is lit, and your eye naturally following that light, and then, of course, the difference in color vastly between this piece and the rest of the piece, you are trapped within Philly's. Of course, there is other things to consider as well. Before we talk about the trappedness of this yet again, this piece had 19 different sketches made for it prior to its prior to its completion, and they ranged from anything relating to the props, to the cash register, to the people, to the modeling, to even just the actual logo for Phillies. There was a vast number of things decided and made about this piece before it was ever even actually produced. Hopper was very anal, if you will, about getting everything right, and it really seemed to pay off here. So, something fun, Nighthawks actually is not a specific place. Or Phillies is not actually a specific place. This place doesn't exist. This place existed only in Hopper's memory, and in Hopper's imagination. Now, so of course, there's the trappedness of this piece, to which I wrote about it while I was doing this research. The viewer is trapped in the diner, at least a stark lighting perspective, and the subject matter being such that it's hard to look away. Perhaps the trapped feeling in this scene could reflect how, as people, we too are trapped with one another. The fear of loneliness causes people to cling to one another, and these four in the diner, while each here, are completely devoid of interaction between one another. That is something of a sadder way to put it, of course, right? This desperation that is evoked by this interpretation of the piece, right? It's not exactly fun. There is another way to look at this piece. And in some ways, it is born out of greater... is born out of greater strife. This piece was notably painted, or rather the completion of this piece was performed in 1942, mere weeks after the bombing of Pearl Harbor and during a period of time in New York City where people were very afraid. People were very, very afraid of bombings on their place of living. And there were many drills and many different things that were put into place and put into precaution to prevent people from being killed, potentially, if New York City were to be bombed. Now, this was a period of great turmoil, great strife for New Yorkers, and Hopper was a New Yorker. However, this is from Joe's diary, his wife's diary. Ed refuses to take any interest in the very likely prospect of being bombed. Edward Hopper every night had his light on. He did not particularly care. They could come and they could bomb him and it wouldn't be his problem anymore. Well, what's he gonna do? He can't fight. He didn't really care. He was just continuing living. And Nighthawks, coming out a mere few weeks after being completed a mere few weeks after the bombing of Pearl Harbor and during this period of great strife in New York, perhaps represents something entirely different. Perhaps it says to us that the only thing that you can do when you are in a moment of great, incredible strife and great, incredible fear is to, however futilely, attempt to live on. Attempt to find some degree of normalcy within this terrifying circumstance, and attempt beyond all else to connect with other people. Maybe that's what Nighthawks means. These four are incredibly uncomfortable, and maybe they have good reason. But they're all here. They all came here for one reason or another. And maybe, just maybe, that reason is that they wanted to be together. So that's kind of my readings of Nighthawks that I've found and made myself. And I felt it relevant to bring that up in the specific case. What do you all think? Oh yeah, oh sure, Hopper makes business in a restaurant, he's a genius. I try to do what I say, I'm financially insolvent, and please leave the bank, sir. What do you all think? I like Nighthawks. I think it's a lovely, lovely piece. I don't disagree that it's likely Hopper's masterpiece. With a degree of certainty it is. It's currently held by me. Before that, it was held by the Institute of Chicago. There is a hope in these things. Where there is a despair, there may also be a hope. And that's what's nice about Nighthawks, to me. So, the time has come. The historical context was fascinating. I'm glad. Like Hopper is a kind of Norman Rockwell type. I can't help but think of his work as frozen in time, representative of a dead America. I can totally see why you think that, but I can't help but disagree, personally. Personally, I find his work to be the same America, just with different props. It's our America still. And I suppose it kind of comes down to whether or not you read them as cozy or harrowing. Paul Chotaz and no exit. I'm afraid I'm not familiar off the top of my head. To me, I think that Hopper's work is emblematic of a similar dead time. A similar kind of loneliness. Why would it be harrowing? To some, Hopper's work is incredibly harrowing. Lonely. Dejected. Too relatable in some ways. Hello, Meddy. It's good to see you. To some others, it's comfy. And it's just down to how you look at it. To me, Hopper kind of demonstrates something about the American dream that inherently tarnishes it. You can have everything. He makes a lot of work about people who are kind of rich being unhappy with one another because they are not people who are happy. I think, Trev, I'm uninterested in the people you're stuck with faced with the choice of cold and caring or spiteful companionship. Yeah. So, smell the air in his work. It smells like the past to me. It smells like things that were. It might just be a sense memory thing. Totally. No, yeah, I could totally read it. I don't think you're wrong. I just don't personally get that from it off the top of my head. But I'm happy that you have something there too. See, too, it makes me feel like I'm awake somewhere where everyone else is sleeping, alone, but not for long. I like that. So, everyone, we now come to the end of the stream. We are not quite done just yet, of course, but it is time for us to begin wrapping up, and I like to end these discussing the influence of the artist's work. And it is so literally older houses than things he painted. We're not done quite yet. Don't worry. We're not done quite yet. We have just a little bit more to go. Edward Hopper is a man who grew up alongside cinema. Cinema grew with him, and he grew with cinema. This is the truth of the matter. Of course, now what this means for him is that, well, he influenced it, and it influenced him. Nix earlier said about one of the pieces in the voyeurism section that rear window as painter. It's really funny you say that, Nix, because Alfred Hitchcock fucking loved Edward Hopper. Alfred Hitchcock adored Hopper. Literally loved him. Alfred Hitchcock. I will show you two different examples of Alfred Hitchcock using Hopper's work in some way or another. Of course, this is a really shitty screen cap, but it is a screen grab from the movie Rear Window, from, of course, Alfred Hitchcock. This is the piece that we mentioned before, the Night Windows. This is the same. In a lot of ways, the kind of anxiety-ridden terror of Rear Window is inspired by Edward Hopper. And that's really cool to me. There are some other instances of influence from other people, too. So there's a story called The Killers by Ernest Hemingway, right? And Ernest Hemingway has this story about some mob guys that go into a diner to find a guy that they gotta kill, right? And that partially inspired Nighthawks, apparently. Now, what's funny is that when they made a film version of Hopper, very inspired by film noir, or very in the film noir style, they used Nighthawks as as the basis, or as the base inspiration. The Killers not the band, Ernest Hemingway's The Killers inspired Edward Hopper, which then in turn inspired Ernest Hemingway's The Killers movie adaptation. It's kind of funny in some ways. Additionally, his attempt to detail, this is not the first time this has happened. If we look at the etchings once more, let's maybe we can find that really quickly. Where are you? Let's find one of these etchings here. I believe it was in this section. I'm like 90% sure it was in this section. Yes. This one right here, I cited this as something that was practically film noir 20 years before film noir. And I'm firmly in the camp of believing that this is so. This came out 21 years before The Maltese Falcon. The Maltese Falcon, of course, being the first widely recognized film noir film. And, of course, it relied on lights and darks. And what does this do? That! And, of course, after The Maltese Falcon comes out, there's clear influence given. Look at that one guy with the back turned. That's like practically the dude from the movie. The people of the time are influencing Hopper to then influence them. And cinema was kind of forever changed in some way by Edward Hopper and his intent in this, because noir was very, very influential as well. So, allow me to really quickly show you the trailer for Psycho, the movie Psycho.
A little more sinister looking, less innocent.
So this is the trailer for the movie Psycho. Just look at this.
Most dire, horrible events took place.
See that house? Look at how that house is framed. Now look at this house from 1925. This is House by the Railroad. Look at that. This is the same.
Because the place is up for sale. Although I don't know.
Alfred Hitchcock fucking loved this man. The framing on this is precisely the same. It's the same picture. Yeah, it's the same picture. They might not be the same house, but they're pretty fucking close, ain't they? Hitchcock adored Hopper, and Hopper adored film. So it's really kind of sweet, in a certain way, that the two of them would influence one another like that. So, allow me to finish with the conclusion. Compared to his contemporaries, Hopper would take realism in a way that would end up depicting much of life not as glamorous or enticing, but dangerous or otherwise desolate. Much of Hopper's success continually outside of the initial push from his wife Jo is attributed to his bold individualism in the face of artistic trends. Hopper made exactly what he wanted, and what he wanted to make was available for interpretation by many, in many different ways. Hopper's influence is undeniable. Nighthawks has become something of a pop culture icon, and it, as well as countless other works, has been cited in works ranging from Blade Runner to concept albums about Hopper's theming. If there is an art form to be influenced, Hopper influenced it. His images of desolation in urban settings and the image of loneliness, quote-unquote, created by him, has been cited as major influences since their inception. Thank you very much for being here tonight. You don't know how much I love doing these things, you know that? These things are hard to make, I'll tell you that much. Sourcing all this art, making sure I'm not fucking stupid and saying the wrong shit. These things are hard to make, alright? But I'll tell you what, I fucking love doing them. And it's because of you. It's because of you. I appreciate you being here, it makes it all worth it. I've been voyeuristic. I hope to see you in the next one. I'm trying to get something of a rhythm going here, so next time we should be looking at someone European. The way I kind of want to go about it is Europe, or like this next one would be Europe. The next one after that would be Asia, or maybe like Africa. Some type of non, European centric art, and then after that will be America again. And that's kind of the rhythm I want to go on. So if you're interested in seeing some stuff about European art, hopefully maybe something that's not just Impressionism in another flavor for the third time. Not that Hokusai was. But if you're interested in seeing something like that, tune in next month for this. Thank you very much for being here. If you missed any of it, you want to see it, this VOD will probably be up by tomorrow on my YouTube. I appreciate it quite a bit. Thank you very much for being here. Let's find someone to rate. There's a fucking ad! God fucking damn it. Stupid fucking ad. Ruining my cool moment. Mad. I'm so mad. Listen to these pinch from your soothing voice and entertaining information. Informative way you convey stuff. It's heckin' great to catch these streams. Aw, thank you. Thank you. Your flattery knows no bounds. I think... She'll know when you'll see it. Okay, thank you. I do have someone who's actually streaming making art right now. I think we're gonna go raid Moon Bitch, if that's cool with all of you. So, thank you very, very much, everybody. I appreciate it a lot. Thank you for being here. I hope you learned something new. I hope you found some art that you enjoyed. If you would like to find any of the art for yourself, you don't need to go very far. I will be posting a zip file folder of all of the work shown here tonight in my Discord, in one of the channels dedicated towards that. So thank you very much. Without further ado, let's get a raid message going. What should be the raid message? And the normal one. How about it? Get that copied in. Use some emotes if you got some emotes. And we'll raid Moonbitch. How about it? Thank you very much. I've been Pinch. You've been delightful. Have a great night. And check your pockets, by the way.